Good evening. It is March 16th. We're here for the Stormwater Management Advisory Committee. It was rescheduled from last Thursday. I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to begin. I'm sure Regina will be here shortly. The first thing we'd like to do is to review and approve the meeting minutes from February's meeting. Are there any comments? Paul, you did a great job of incorporating everyone's thoughts on these. Thank you.
I motion to approve them, if everyone else is good with that.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Did we save ourselves 8 minutes?
We saved ourselves 8 minutes. It's good to start on the positive.
Since we saved ourselves 8 minutes, can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
So I just wanted to make a quick comment. So in addition to being a Radnor resident, I also am involved in a business that's up in Garrett Hill. And during the last snowstorm, a couple of my employees, actually 3 separate of our employees, came to me and said they really noticed a difference as the storm was progressing and as it finished, the difference of the roads when they literally left the township and came into Radnor. And Steve, I just want to thank you and your guys because it really made me feel proud to be in Radnor, and I know.
Thank you very much. And that really just, it all falls on to our people. I have the greatest bunch of guys. Very knowledgeable, very skilled at what they do, very dedicated. So it all falls to the men of the Public Works Department. They do a great job.
Well, thanks. And I just wanted to add that with one other comment. I know, that this board has already approved the stormwater administrator, or approved sending to the Board of Commissioners a stormwater administrator recommendation that be started. And I'd like to just ask us if we're okay with tonight just progressing with this meeting like that's going to happen, because for us to get into dialogue about something we've already done, I think we should assume that, because a lot of the things we're going to talk about really requires us to have a stormwater administrator on board. And, it relates exactly to my comment, because we know how hard Steve works. He's coming to these meetings every night while tackling snowstorms and every other God-forsaken thing that happens in Radnor. So anyway, are you guys okay with that we just don't even get into that? I mean, the memo's done. It's ready to go to the Board of Commissioners unless I'm missing something.
No, I agree.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
ask that after public comment, I guess the board saw that email about the salient points regarding the sunshine laws. So we have Matthew McHugh from our solicitor's office, Grim, Beam, and Thatcher, that would step through that memo with you folks. Respectfully request that be on prior to the incentive program so he can do his thing, so to speak, and go from there. And also, just to let you know, I think we have a real good way of addressing, if this board so wishes, the watershed study and the projects. And we can get into that a little bit later with Dan Weibel when the time comes, because we can move forward with a proposal from an engineering firm regardless of the stormwater program administrator recommendation. Okay? This board can still recommend or deny, that. So just to throw that out there.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment.
Hello, Chip Layfield, Wayne. I see that it looks like there's going to be some training on sunshine law, open records, et cetera. I really hope that your attorney spends a good amount of time on emails and trying to find consensus via email, text message, and things like that, that really, I think, have the potential of being very corrosive to the spirit that you're trying to develop here community-wide. Because if people really feel this board's doing all its work behind closed doors or at the behest of particular commissioners, I think you're going to find that the community will not support continued paying this fee/tax. And it really There is an example of the Shade Tree Commission when it was first instituted. It was kind of taken over by a few commissioners, and it really became a very controversial endeavor for many years, and that didn't have a standalone tax/fee like this does. And I think you really have to be guarding of the integrity of this group and the fact that you're working for the community and not just a few commissioners or the majority of the commissioners, but that you're working really for stormwater management and for the watershed. And that's why I'm kind of nervous about this bifurcated approach that you're going towards now, with projects on the one hand and the studies on the other. I think a comprehensive model is the way to go. I think you'll find you have the most trust in the community. I know the commissioners are pushing to do this, but they have a horrible, horrible record with stormwater management. I don't think you could point to one success. So I hope that doesn't befall this board. I hope that you can really develop trust and use your expertise to really deal with the real issues that are in the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, then we'll move on to the presentation of the Sunshine Law.
Thank you. As Steve said, my name is Matt McHugh, and I'm from Grimbean and Thatcher with the Township Solicitor's Office. I understand that all of you, I think, have received the memo from John Rice and myself, and that goes through both the Sunshine Act and the Open Records Act. I won't belabor you by going through line by line every aspect of that, but essentially I'd like to just point out some of the major aspects of those laws as they relate to this board. First, with the Sunshine Act, what you're talking about is that's generally referred to as the Open Meetings Law. And what that kind of encompasses and deals with is it prohibits or it requires that prearranged gatherings of the agency that are attended by a quorum of the members for purposes of deliberating or taking official action are properly advertised and given notice to the public. And there's a lot of buzzwords that are kind of in there. And what you're looking at is whether a gathering is prearranged, such as where you are tonight is obviously a prearranged gathering. It's your regular meeting. But there are other aspects that can be prearranged in that sense. Conference phone calls. There's not case law on these points, but there are also a lot of aspects of whether you're involved in a text message conversation or an email chain and whether that constitutes a prearranged gathering. The next aspect of that, which is really important, is whether it's attended by a quorum of the members. So there's 7 members of this board. If 4 of you are involved in a phone conference or an email exchange that is pretty much a string of conversation, not necessarily something that is somebody emails something and 5 days later they respond, but kind of conversation that is ongoing dialogue back and forth, you may be in violation of a Sunshine Act there. You may have a quorum, a prearranged gathering of a quorum of the members. Now, just because 4 of you are in one place at one time, though, doesn't mean that you're in violation of the Sunshine Act just by virtue of being on the board. You're looking at, you have to have deliberation or official action. And there's some question as to whether advisory boards come in the purview of the Sunshine Act as far as recommending official action. And the definitions that are contained therein, and also just general case law and policies of most townships, and I believe this township as well, is that all of the boards and commissions from the Board of Commissioners and the advisory boards thereunder are subject to the Sunshine Act and are going to be conducting official action or taking deliberations there. So you're generally making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and that is something that is considered official action under the purposes of the Sunshine Act. So whether you're deliberating and making discussions or actually, as you do it in the public meeting, taking a vote, whether those things appear to be prearranged to the public are issues that come up under the Sunshine Act. So anytime you meet that definition of a prearranged gathering of a quorum of agency members for purposes of conducting agency business or deliberating agency business, you have to follow the Sunshine Act, which requires public notice, advertisement of the hearing, and so on and so forth. Now, there are certain exceptions that are designated in the Sunshine Act for when you don't have to follow the public notice requirements. The most commonly used one is executive sessions, and there are executive sessions that are permitted under law, and there's specific aspects you have to follow to fall under an executive session. Also, a quorum of the agency may attend a conference or a working session as long as they're not discussing and deliberating agency business. So those are the types of aspects you're talking about as far as exceptions to the Sunshine Law that you should be aware of. The memo also talks about what actions are taken to produce a special meeting. That's requiring advertisements. I don't believe any members of the board are required to do that. I think Steve and his staff probably handles that, so you don't need to be concerned with that. But it's just something, that is nice to know. And also discusses what types of records must be kept of public meetings. And I just heard you in your opening comments remarking at the minutes and how well they were done. So that's something that would fall under the public meetings and what kind of notes need to be kept. And obviously, the more detailed is better. I think the Sunshine Law requires a rather detailed keeping of the minutes as opposed to a standard, everyone was present, this person spoke, this is what we talked about, end of story. But I've had a chance to review the minutes, and I saw that they were extremely detailed. So that's something that is, I think, a positive when you're talking about compliance with the Sunshine Law. Are there any specific questions that you guys have before I move on to just a brief statement on the Open Records Act about the Sunshine Law? Are there any specific issues that anybody has or questions they have on the open meetings requirements?
Do you have any recommendations if there's work to be done outside of this meeting? What are your guidelines for that committee type work?
Well, as long as you're not meeting in a prearranged meeting of a quorum of you, you're not going to fall under the notice requirements for the Sunshine Act.
So email.
Well, I think you might have been walking in when I was saying emails. As part of when you're dealing with emails, the issue under the Sunshine Act is whether it's a prearranged gathering of agency members. And there's not a lot of case law on how emails are to be handled as far as violations of the Sunshine Act. But the general guideline that we give is that if you're involved in a continuous email string where it's more than a quorum of the agency and people are talking back and forth consistently, almost in a conversational tone, as if you would be able to do in a meeting, you may be in violation of the Sunshine Act there. So it's better to preclude yourself from doing that. That doesn't mean that the agency can't have a email chain, as far as scheduling of meetings and things of that nature. It may be appropriate to do that. But as far as you're talking about what official actions the agency is going to be making, whether this board's going to make a recommendation, you should refrain from doing that in email communications with a quorum of you.
Could I ask a clarifying question to what Regina asked?
Sure.
The way I've read this, your answer was on a decisional nature, not a pre-decisional work-related, like work papers, when we are trying to establish, a guideline for what would then be talked about publicly and eventually sent to the board. Are you saying that we can't have any communications on pre-decisional draft policies and procedures?
It's not
Via
saying
email?
No, you can have conversations via email. That's appropriate at times. But as you get into whether more so what the official action is and deliberation on what the official action is, those have to be done in public.
I have a question to follow Regina's question. So subcommittees are a way of doing work outside of the normal working hours of the committee. So long as the subcommittee, and again, John Rice always says we shouldn't practice law. So if the subcommittee is made up of 3 members and they deliberate on a specific topic, and as we've done in the past, and then they bring that back to this board as a whole, the subcommittee of 3 cannot make any decisions on their own regarding what's going to happen because they're a part of a quorum. They're not a quorum. So when they come back to this committee and enlighten them to work to move forward, is that acceptable?
Absolutely, because you're not in violation of the Sunshine Act there because you're not a quorum. I mean, remember what the idea of the open meetings law was to prevent the back room, the 7 of you sitting in a room and discussing everything and having your vote ready, and then walking out into the public and making a vote with no discussion. That's the purpose of the law behind it. So subcommittees are a common thing, and they're appropriate. Now, if you have 5 on a subcommittee, then you're going to have an issue about meeting under the Sunshine Law. That's why I would recommend any subcommittee be less than a quorum, for 2 reasons. One, so you're not in violation, but also so it's not official action. It's not binding upon those 3 members aren't going to be able to bind your board making a recommendation. There's still 4 other people who could potentially vote against their recommendation.
As far as the communications on a subcommittee, should we always be copying Steve or someone at the township so that there's a formal record of, anything that's, committee related?
It's probably a good idea if you're discussing, stuff related to this board, and that's what I'll get into also with the Open Records Act stuff. Something that, there's a lot in this memo about the process for open records and right to know requests. What I think more important for you guys to know is what documents you're creating, whether they are as members of a board, you're part of the township umbrella, and your emails and communications and documents and memorandum that you produce relative to this agency business are potentially disclosable under the right to know law. So for that purpose, to answer your question, I mean, I think Steve probably wants to be abreast of any issues or any things you guys are talking about that are relative to this board and this commission, but those are potentially disclosable under the right to know request.
I guess for me, I think it's, I use my personal email for this, and I'm looking back, and I should have established a new email for this, because everything gets kind of mixed together. So then if someone at the township is copied on everything, then that way at least I know if I deleted it somewhere, it lives on the township server somewhere. Is that a safe assumption?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the township has record-keeping requirements that they will, and from the township solicitor's perspective, I'm actually involved. We do a lot of litigation work for townships, and when the township manager or township staff has copies of those documents, it makes it a lot easier. I'm in a case right now where we're trying to get emails from former supervisors and commissioners about township business that goes back to the 1980s, not emails, but documents. And to try to find those things, it's almost impossible to get it from people who are no longer involved in the township.
Just so you know, so here at Radnor, we have an open records officer, Melissa Kahn. So if a right to know request comes in, she'll let us know if it's anything outside the email, so I can dig for a report, whatever. But what does occur is she has a program that she's going to type in the keywords and maybe some names who she thinks might be involved. So really, it takes it out of the employees of Radnor's hands. She goes and, whether it's Stormwater Committee, whatever it may be, any email that has that in it is generated. So if you email me, it's going to come up when she does her search, and that's, with anything, any Open Records Act. So the good part about that is it's very objective. It doesn't rely on one of us saying, boy, I have some emails, because that thing goes way back. It goes into all our files. It goes into anything on the server, and it will just spit out X emails that have that in there.
Are there any other questions about the open meetings aspect of it? And I'll just go briefly into the Open Records Act, and I guess a good portion of the memo really talks about what an open record is. Obviously, the township is an agency that falls under the definition of the right to know law, and as a subcommittee of the township, so is this committee. So therefore, any documents, as I was saying, email correspondence, memorandum, your minutes, video of the meeting, they are potential records that can be sought for disclosure under the right to know law by a requester. Steve basically gave you the overview of how it works. I don't think that's necessarily anything that should be a surprise to you guys, but really what I wanted to get across to you was that there are kind of everyday emails or discussions or documents, anything that's in written or recordable form that could potentially be disclosed under a right to know request. And the memo goes through and it'll explain certain exemptions. There's a long list of them, over 30, I believe, of reasons why the township could potentially deny a right to know request. And those are basically the main crux of those are they're for personal safety, i.e. they're not going to give out your your home address or things that people can identify you other than your name generally, but they'll also things that are pre-deliberational, so that if you have an issue that is before the board or that you guys haven't finished your recommendation yet and someone requests those may not be disclosed until you guys have actually made your official recommendation. I think that's an important aspect, so that you guys won't have, if a memorandum is provided by, you talked about subcommittees. If a subcommittee prepares a memorandum and submits it to you guys and you haven't made an official recommendation, a requester might not be able to go and get that before and until you make an official recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So that's kind of the idea behind that, and there's a number of other exemptions from the right to know law, but I think really the pre-deliberational, as well as the fact that minutes that haven't been approved yet aren't available until they've been approved through the right to know law. Are there any other questions about the open records and the right to know law issues that you may have?
Thank you very much for coming in and going over this.
No problem.
Could I ask a question?
Directed to us or directed to the gentleman?
About the open records.
Sure. We have one quick question for you, Matthew.
Yeah, if you don't mind. So our text messages, they can be discoverable too, I guess, with the right to know request?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there are instances where you can get a text message. That's correct.
And I was wondering about these subcommittees. Do you think it's advisable that they be open to the public? I don't think you're going to have a lot of public attending, but that they be made open to the public?
That's a policy decision for the board ultimately. Under the law, if there's less than a quorum, there's no requirement.
Even if you have a majority of the subcommittee, you're saying that it's the majority of this committee?
Of the committee, right. So there'd have to be four individuals, at least four individuals of this committee as part of a subcommittee for the Sunshine Law to come into effect, where they'd have to have public notice of any meeting.
Okay, I would just restate that the reason for that open records law was so that government officials such as yourself and other elected officials realize that the intent is that these records are all open, that it should be considered an open record with very few exceptions, and that's a good thing. Like the Sunshine Law, it's a good thing to build trust and support for what you're doing. Thanks. I appreciate it.
But if I could just say, and we'll move on, I've worked in federal government for more than 20 years, and, fully appreciate the importance of public records and the need to know. But from a taxpayer's perspective, you have to understand that there's a burden of cost in that too. That every time a public record is asked for, Steve's folks have to, or whoever in the township, and so, we could talk a little bit more about it, but anything that we would be doing in a subcommittee, we would bring forward in a public forum. So I guess I'm missing, and I don't want to get into debate with you, I'm just missing your point of that you're missing some information, because anything that we would bring for discussion and deliberation. And I'd ask you to just hold your comment for a couple minutes, because we're going to, in a few minutes, get into the SFR, what we think might be called the rebate program instead of the incentive program. But, we've gone over that for several months. We've had multiple meetings. That's a great example of where Paul did a ton of research originally, and we got into things. But that's been talked about exhaustively, and I think that's our best example of how we worked as a subcommittee. So,
The other thing, just quickly, the subcommittees, I don't think have meetings, really. They kind of just do their own work and then compile. So it's not, there's no meeting to attend.
But just to clarify, I thought, Matt, you said that a chain of emails might constitute a meeting. I just want to clarify that.
That's right, but that also, as far as subcommittees go, we're talking less than the quorum. So as we're, you have to kind of parse through the definitions, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. It has to be a prearranged gathering, which could be an email chain, of more than 4 members of your committee for the purpose of deliberating or taking official action. So you guys can have an email chain of the 7 of you. If you're not talking about deliberating or taking official action, you want to talk about who's going to win the March Madness bracket, that's not going to fall under the Sunshine Act. So it's a matter of what you're discussing also there.
it would be if we don't say Villanova.
I've heard 4, and I've heard more than 4. What is the number?
You have 7 members, so as long as there's 4, that would be enough to take action. So
Okay.
4 of you for this committee would constitute a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, moving on, the residential incentive program.
Okay.
Paul, you're on.
I guess so. So there's a handout. Do we have enough for the public? Do we give them extra copies, Steve?
There's copies on the back table for anybody
Okay.
in the public.
So as Joe has said, the residential subcommittee incentives, and I guess we're also the other committee too, for the ODP, have been discussing this for quite a few months now. And based upon the last meeting and then some feedback from a community member, we put together this list of issues that we'd like to discuss at the meeting. So the top of the list here is proposed goals for incentive rebate program, okay? And so these ones we listed were entice residents to build early demonstration projects, so get the word out to get this going. Start a conversation among neighbors about how stormwater management isn't just big public works projects, but something that can be done individually or by individual residents, and then allowing each resident to contribute in some way. So we want it to contribute to the stormwater reduction in the stormwater problem, but we also want it to have a public face to it as well.
Right, so I would like to add to that list, the last statement that you just pointed out, is that these are intended to improve our situation as far as stormwater goes. So low-cost BMPs, basically, best management practices, on non-publicly owned land.
Okay. So I'll put that in there. So we did have this discussion of incentive versus rebate. Are we okay with the first one? Anybody else? Okay. The second was, okay, so what do we want to call it? Do we want to call it an incentive, which is where we've been talking based upon the language that's used around the country? We want to call it a rebate. I have no personal preference. I'll just kind of put it out there for discussion.
I'm sorry, I just want to add, I apologize, that wasn't part of the packet, so that's not back on the table.
Do you want to go out and make a couple?
Absolutely.
Let me open up my file here.
Boy, if we only had a stormwater administrator.
It's 3 pages.
Oh, it's 3 pages? Where's the other?
There you go. Here's the other two.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, there it is,
Paul,
okay.
when you find the other two, hand them over and hand you a packet.
Oh, yeah, do you need the first page?
I do again, if you wouldn't mind. That's all right. So rebate versus incentive.
I wasn't trying to change the program to not be an incentive program. I was recommending on the form itself that we're going to distribute to the public, the word rebate kind of says what it is. It says that you're going to get your money back for money that you've spent, and then you're going to be done. Yes. It's a portion of your expense that that's reimbursable, and it's not an ongoing. I feel like rebate says that.
I like your idea.
Still an incentive program, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
Is when
I
you're
think
discussing it with the Board of Commissioners and residents and so forth. But when you go out to actually package the form, the rebate is, I think a little clear for.
Okay. So just to clarify, they would never get more money than they put into the project?
Never.
Okay. I hear you. Let's see. So coming to that, then, the maximum amount of rebate, we were talking about a discussion about different ways to proceed, again, in the first year. And the assumption in the first year is that we're going to try this, and then we'll come back to this in a year and ask, did this work, and how would we improve it? So different options. One is not to have a cap at all in the first year in terms of how much spent. A second is a first come, first serve, cap to 50,000, and an unlimited number of BMPs per residential property. A third is first come, first served, cap to 100K, and have an unlimited number of BMPs per resident. So 50,000 versus 100,000. And my argument there is that we're not going to, I don't think we're going to get a credits program going this year, so why not just put that money all to residential property? I mean, maybe we will, but it's now April, so I don't know when we get to that point. Or limit the number of projects per resident, or limit the number of dollars per resident. So they're out there.
And if I could, so just to be clear, Paul, we never agreed yet as a group that 50K was the right number, or 50K or 100K was the right number. So, but this is the time for the discussion. And then since the last meeting, we asked, and Radnor supplied us today with some critical information that we need. So I'm just going to read that off. And then when Steve comes back, I'm sure I guess this will be in the public record. So what we asked is we wanted to understand the total amount of dollars that Radnor was taking in each year, and then how much of that was single family and how much of that was ODP, which are the two big buckets. And the answer we got back was Radnor took in $1,079,000 and some change. And it's basically split about 45-55, if my math's right. Single-family residences provide $476K and ODP $602K. But the real critical thing we want to understand is what is the average cost of the fee/tax for a Radnor SFR person, and it's $69.73 to be exact. And that was what we were kind of looking for to gauge, I think, the total amount as far as a percentage basis of how much we should be putting aside for the incentive/rebate program, and then what's a reasonable amount based upon the amount we're taking in with our very simple fee structure, which is a big thing about we have a very simple SFR fee structure.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. Sorry to be so talky tonight, but one of them is exactly where you're headed. You got to look at how much you're taking in and make it, a portion of it, and what portion makes sense. And I think that's, very responsible. And another thought I have on it is that I'd like to make these incentives actually pay us back. What we are incentivizing is worthwhile. So if you were to take that money and spend it on a larger scale project, you may actually be doing better with your money in these incentives, because you're not paying for the property, you're not paying for the design, and you're not even paying for the labor, because we're really looking at material costs. So with that in mind, if we really did our homework and got it going properly, there really is no need to limit, that expense to a small portion, because we may actually be doing better with those projects than we are with engineered large construction projects. So I don't know how other people feel about that.
I agree with you.
But it is a pilot year, so obviously you want to put something, some kind of framework around it.
And being Mr. Fiscal Conservative, I kind of like the idea of capping it at some point so that we can clearly delineate to the outside world what we're willing to spend and then measure it. And if we really see a great response, and then, we can always readdress it. But I think if we just leave it unlimited, that's going to be hard to, me as Joe taxpayer would struggle with that.
No, I agree. And also because there are some other obligations that we need to address, such as the things we've been addressing, like failing infrastructure.
So what I hear is that no cap first year is
Some cap first
some
year.
cap. And so the question is, what would that cap be?
What would that cap look like?
And then how does that fold out in terms of the residents? I mean, the argument made by the person in the email to us was, why not just let it be open and have, maybe 4 or 5 people would be leaders in doing this, and they put maybe 5 or 10 projects on their property, and then they become kind of an example to other people about how to do it. So why would you limit the amount of money that they could get if they could be the people that make a great case for what could be done?
To clarify, my idea of a cap is on the overall
Right.
total, not the number per resident. I don't have a problem with residents having multiple.
Any other comments? Go.
Well, we came up with 50K as roughly 5% of the total fee taken in. And so I think that's a reasonable starting point. So I'd like to make a motion for 5%, which is about 50K to get us started.
That's 5% of
It's a good question. That's 5% of our
the
total.
total. So it's like almost a little more than 10% of
It's
it.
10% of the SFR, you're absolutely right, but we know that
Sure.
there's no way that we'll get
No, I
the
agree with you. So
ODP program.
I feel comfortable with that number, that it's the entire amount because of that reason, for sure, this year.
Should complete my thought is that we know for a fact that there is no way that we'll get an ODP credit program stood up this year. And if we don't get a stormwater administrator, I think it would be very hard for us to ever get a ODP, because we took that as far as we could as a committee. And that's what I would recommend that Radnor consider just not doing that, because we just don't have the skill set internally to work that to conclusion.
If I may add, Madam Chair, and to go with Mr. Shan, so somebody has to receive all these applications, the receipts, track all this, approve, and we have a 2-step approval in the township. So no single person can approve a disbursement. It takes 2 people to do so as a check and balance. So and that is one of the tasks, if we get a stormwater administrator, would be to take care of these items. Just so you don't, just a personal opinion, $50,000 is huge. I look at that as 1,000 residents coming in and getting $50 for their rain barrel or whatever. And that's, just to give you an example, on our free tree giveaway, we did 110, and that was for a free tree. I mean, this was not a stick tree. This was a tree in an actual container. It was a 5-gallon container. So I would recommend that, and respectfully request, maybe draw that number back a little bit, which frees up that money to do all the different things you said, because realistically, I don't see 500 BMPs being installed in the township. Hopefully we get to that and we get that huge benefit from all these incremental measures, but I don't know if you would get that in your first year.
I guess I would say let's look at where the money goes first in terms of, $50 is one. We're talking about a rain garden for up to 200. So let's get to the numbers before we, maybe in terms of project-wise, and then we can come back to the dollar amount. Is that okay? Okay. For this section, just to kind of wrap that up, are we not limiting the number of projects or dollars per resident? I think that's what I heard. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm in favor of leaving that at least somewhat open-ended, not to a single. I mean, you may want to put some number up there. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Do you want to put some kind of cap, like maximum of 5 or maximum of a certain dollar figure?
I mean, I would hate to discourage a resident if they have an area that they could put a rain garden, and they could put 2 rain barrels in the back of their property, and they could turn their gutters towards, a land. I'd hate to discourage that, so if it was a cap, I would think we really need to consider what that would be. Because I'd like to promote multiple. And if you're going to spend the time.
Well, sometimes it's,
Yeah.
if you're going to do it, it's all or nothing. It's
Right.
now or never
Right.
kind of a thing, and you'd rather see them scale up.
Yeah, I don't think, I would be in favor of not having a cap. So,
Okay, great. All right, so the numbers we came up with in terms of rebate amounts, a rain barrel, we said 25 each. We were saying, well, 1 barrel, 2 barrels, 8 barrels. It sounds like we're saying no limit on the number of barrels. I think I heard that. We're saying rain garden up to 200. A dry well, formerly known as a cistern, is 100, and then a downspout disconnection up to 50 is the numbers that we think make sense. We don't know, but
I just wanted to make a brief comment for the non-SFR geeks among us, which, now Paul and I.
it's sad, but yeah.
The numbers we're throwing around, I was really excited to see that they do come from some science. So when we proposed this to the Board of Commissioners, I really think we need to have the science behind that of, if you put 1 barrel in, you're really only capturing a certain amount of square footage in a 1-inch rainstorm of a roof. While if you put see, Maya's going to be proud of me. Well, if you put a rain garden in, you could, even though it's 4 times the cost, you may get 8 times the stormwater benefit from that. And I think that needs to be articulated when we talk about these, because I hear you talking about numbers, and it's like, why 8 rain barrels? And, well, but, I think that's important, that we see the benefit, as Regina said at the beginning.
Yeah, and after we just said no caps, I don't mind the 8 rain barrel cap anymore, I'm thinking about rain barrels as a nice introductory for some people. If that's the biggest step they can take today, then that's a step. However, the rain garden gets us a lot more for the investment. And even a dry well can do a lot for stormwater management, depending on the size and how it's designed, because it's going to infiltrate. And, that does things not just for taking it out of our streets, it's recharging it into our streams. And so those are the types of things I'd kind of want to, push for. I don't want to say more, but I'd like to see somehow be a part of the equation. And I think by putting some kind of a limit on the rain barrels, we kind of send that message that they're kind of not as.
okay, at one time we first introduced rain barrels, we talked about $50 a barrel. What happened that it dropped down to 25?
What we looked at was the amount of money that one could get, the amount of water one could capture with a rain garden versus, say, a rain barrel. And we were looking at basically using the rain garden as a reference point and saying, if that's 200, how much water can you capture with a rain barrel? And so you ratio it down. It's $25. If 200 is a rain barrel, then 25 is a rain. I mean,
Where I'm going
try
with
it
this.
again.
I see your reasoning. Where I'm going with this is we're trying to generate an incentive to get people talking about stormwater. And $25 to me, if a barrel costs between 50 and 75, is not a whole lot of an incentive. This is the first step. And hopefully when someone starts taking a look at this first step, they're going to say, really, I could do a lot more than this. But at least this gets things going. And we need to get momentum and people talking about this. And I really believe that it would be better to kick it back up, just because it is the first step.
I agree with you. I think that's a really good point, because I don't think we thought through, that part of the idea is the incentive, and maybe the person that buys the rain barrel will 2 years later want to do a rain garden, or,
Well, if that's the case, certainly a rain garden costs a lot more than $200, so why isn't the limit $400 for a rain garden?
We're talking about incentives now. If you get to the point if you put in a rain barrel, or even are considering a rain barrel, and then start thinking about the overall stormwater and looking at what else you could do, the cost is not going to be a big deal on something like a rain garden. But what I'm advocating is that the initial cost for the person who hasn't started into this yet just gives them a reason, hey, for almost what you pay for it, you can start out with a rain barrel and start thinking about stormwater and start the conversation, because really that's what we want to do.
No, I think you have a good point there. I think you do need to have it be enough of an incentive that people will take it up. But on that same, note, I wouldn't mind if the rain garden went up slightly. I think a small rain garden like we're talking about, the materials tend to be around $500, and that's without the installation. So if we went like to $250, we'd kind of be looking at a half. I don't know if that's something that makes sense. If we're, the rain barrel, say we went up to 50 and it's maybe 2/3 of the cost, then I think that's a good incentive for people. And also if we partner with somebody to get us lower cost rain barrels available, like if we, do that to make that easier on the homeowners. I think that would be another way for us to make it make sense. I know it's
I wouldn't
also a
object.
matter of convenience, because sometimes there's a rain barrel workshop and they'll give you the free rain barrel, but it just happens you can't get to that workshop. So this is for anybody, anytime, which I like about it. You don't have to show up in a particular place at that moment in order to take advantage of it.
I agree.
I was just going to say, I agree with raising the rain barrel and the rain garden. I think
have no
you
problem
really
with
got to jumpstart this, and I think that's a very positive way to do that.
I agree.
And if Steve says this is a lot of money, then not that we want to just throw the money out there, but we want to make a good point to the public that this is worth their while.
If we spent in the first year $50,000, that's quite a program.
I think we'd be thrilled.
All right, so, yeah, go ahead,
Well,
Paige.
just one thing on, the rain barrels are pretty straightforward, but the rain garden, how do you control what sort of soil mix and all someone's putting in the rain garden? How do you verify that?
We have later, I think we have later on specifications. So we say, it's actually the second to the next point. Rain barrel, we say a minimum 100 square feet, 6-inch depth, and then 12-inch of loosened soil. We didn't want to get too technical. Joe was pushing for simple, but we do want to make those basic points about what has to happen with the rain garden. Is that, and we'll come to that. Just if,
When we get to that, I need to contribute some more information.
okay.
But I'll wait till it's time.
okay. So we were talking about then what points we want to make in the brochure. We talk about the fact that the incentives or rebates were based upon the cost and impact on stormwater. We're not asking that they be verified in the future. This is basically they give us some documentation that they spent the money on what we asked for and it's installed. We want to make the point that it's not a yearly credit. This is a one-time thing. And then we give some kind of design recommendations, and the idea was that we just find some outside source that can give us a nice brochure that we could use that's publicly available rather than create our own. Steve, you were going to?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we don't preclude a verification, because I haven't sat down with Bill White and gone through all this yet, because I know this is still a growing process with this committee, but I'm going to figure that he's going to want some verification, whether it be a certain sampling, but he's going to want to see that Paul Bergmeyer put in his rain garden, and me or somebody in my department is going to go out there and, like I say, maybe on a small sampling basis and verify that it's there. So there could be some type of verification. I don't want to say that's required, but I'm even going to think that from Bill White's standpoint as our CFO and the auditors, and Bill's a very conservative person, very good for the residents of this township, he's going to say, hey, I want to know that this is actually happening. So you need to go out there and do a sampling of see if these guys got rain barrels. I just don't want to take that away.
I think I was envisioning a receipt as well as a photograph of it installed as part of the application for the rebate. Is
I like
that something that
photographs.
makes sense?
I
You know,
like
it's a picture of that installed BMP as well as a receipt for the actual expense.
That was actually a part of our conversations all along, Steve, is that we specifically did not want to burden you or your staff that's already overworked with, we thought that this would be on the burden, but it would be a simple burden on the who's filing the rebate, because they're going to need, some of it's as easy as a receipt or a receipt and a picture, but that to me is, in the spirit of trying to do things, the tax isn't high, and quite frankly, really neither is this rebate. It's
No, we're talking very small amounts of money, so we don't want to expend large amounts to implement. So
Thank
we're
you.
trying to keep it as simple and
And on
doable.
our proposed GIS system, should be able to click on a parcel, and we'd be able to see that picture and what they did, and that would all be part of a specific layer, hopefully.
Okay, so I think us hearing these particular points are okay. Now, to come to specifics, proposed specifications, so as we just said, all projects, we have a photo of the completed installation and receipts. We specify a rain barrel, 45-gallon minimum, can't use a 5-gallon bucket. Rain garden, as I said before, 100 square feet, 6 inches in depth. And again, these numbers came from, actually, Dan was the one that recommended this for that. And then 12-inch loosened soil, wrong name. Okay. Okay, and then a dry well, we just had a number that we'd gotten from, Charlotte, or I can't remember where, specifically saying minimum 50 cubic feet. So those, go ahead, Regina, you're on.
So, I was so enlightened on Saturday at the rain garden workshop. I just can't help sharing. Met some really good contacts. In Ambler, they're doing a lot of this, and a lot of it's through volunteers. And what they're doing is before anyone goes out to install, someone actually comes out and looks at the site and helps them to make sure this indeed is a good place for a rain garden. And they have protocols for testing your infiltration. Initially, they had a professional doing this free of charge, coming out and doing infiltration testing. But as they shifted over to residents, they found they weren't as successful with it. So they gave a little more guidance, and they've got really detailed criteria for their installation procedures as well as materials and things like that. And I think if we're going to go ahead with the rain garden, we would really borrow from them and put these successful tools in the hands of anyone who wants to go about this. And at that workshop itself, there were at least, I would say, 15 people who signed up to have someone come out and give them guidelines on
I guess-
installing a rain garden in their property. And this volunteer is going to go out there and help folks decide if this is a good place or where to put it and how to go about it. And they're willing to work with us.
So, I mean, let's see, them being Ambler Township?
Radnor person
Okay.
who's going to do that.
Okay.
It's through there are 4 sponsors to that program, so I'm getting them all mixed up. But I'll get more details as I think we're going to get the presentations put online, maybe on the library website even, because the library hosted it, so that people who weren't able to attend can get the information. But I definitely want to create an environment for success for anyone who wants to undertake this. So we have a lot of clay soils here. And, if you're not as familiar with stormwater and where to put your rain garden, you could really make it harder on yourself than easier if you don't have that little bit of advice up front. So
What I
with that in
hear
mind,
is that.
I'm not saying so much requirement as I am guidelines, because again, it's really for the success of the homeowner that we would be putting them out there so that this would be effective.
So again, just to clarify, the only thing you're asking us to amend on this list is what we say about the rain garden. So do you have specific language you'd like to throw in there, or?
It's going to be forthcoming. I
Okay.
can't spell it out today, but some of
Okay.
it will even be as detailed as how to angle your sides of your dugout area.
So this comes back to Joe's point of simplicity. There was slope. We were talking about slope of the yard. Joe, you want to speak to the?
Yeah, what we had talked about previously, which may work very well with what you're saying, is that we kind of had an idea that the form itself would be simple.
Right, but we want to back that up
Right.
with solid scientific
Right.
guidelines for how they can be successful. For instance, the bottom of the rain garden itself has
Right.
to be level.
So then what we talked about, which I think would be still good, I mean, I sent out something that Philadelphia had, it was in the Inquirer yesterday, that was some decent guidelines of just, public ways to do things. But we had talked about the fact that when our when our stormwater administrator comes on board, we would just add a little piece to the Radnor website under stormwater that would point them to, hey, guidelines for how to install a rain barrel properly, how to install, and so to me, I consider that what you're saying is great, but it would be like an implementation detail. And under there, we could
And I
even-
agree with you. And I think I sent something out a little while ago about something, it was like if you choose this method, you kind of have like a rubber stamp for how to address your stormwater if you install a deck. I think that was in East Goshen. And they gave all the details. If you just follow this, you don't have to hire an engineer. Like, that's the type of thing that, I'm envisioning, is like, it's just the blueprint is there, all the details. But even going beyond that and a little bit of hand-holding and having access to someone who will come out and consult
but
if
just-
needed.
That's right. but
Not
just,
by requirement.
But so I repeat and understand what you're saying is that, first of all, we're clear that this is not a regulatory type of inspection, have to fill out form and paperwork to get approval to put this in. This is a process that's voluntary, that we are willing to give someone a rebate for installing a stormwater mitigation activity, but we want to give them the good guidance that they can click on, and if you can get folks that can volunteer to go out, I think that's awesome. But it should be,
But down the road, we'll see. It's pilot.
Right.
We may find that we've had 10 rain gardens go in and only 3 of them were successful. Well, then, okay, maybe we need to pre-approve the location. We learned our lesson. That type of thing. Ambler learned their lesson when they had to remediate some of their gardens because they weren't draining. They had to go back in and install sand wicks, and they decided, well, from now on, everybody's putting in sand wicks. We don't want to have to remove plants and disturb it all to go back and fix it when it's so easy to put it in the first place. But I feel like if we take all of their learned lessons and put them out there, we won't have to relive their mistakes.
Sounds good. So you'll send something about the language on that. Great. Okay. So I think we're good with that. The timing of another application from the same property, different options. They can apply the following year for more, every 3 years, or once and done. Our original thought was once and done based upon what we've seen elsewhere, but there was discussion at the last meeting and then further after that. So I'll just say, what do you think?
I think we should see how many people
Okay.
apply
Okay.
and assess it after our pilot.
So we don't say anything about.
I
this
think
is-
at this point, I would rather, if I had to choose between those 3 options, I would say they're open. They can come right back next year.
Okay.
That would be my preference, but other people might disagree.
No, I agree with you, and I think, too, looking at the budget that we have on a yearly basis and projects that are coming in, we might be able to have a better assessment of opening up more options and BMPs, every year.
Even adding new
Right.
to the list, yeah.
Yeah, and just identifying it as this year or the following year, when we get around to reevaluating, it'll be a lot easier to change that and say, for whatever reason, we want to go to every 3 years, or we want to go once and done, whatever. But to start out, that's a good choice.
And I guess it would be with the premise that whatever you did this year wouldn't be held against you next year because we didn't tell you so, right? I guess.
fine.
Like this year is kind of like we're already in March. The realistic nature of things is, we want to do everything and anything to encourage people.
Right, okay. All right, we'll
And
leave
just
it
looking
that.
at time too, and I don't want to rush this because it is important, but we do
We're
have
close to
other
done.
things. Okay, I just wanted
Okay.
just to everyone to be aware of.
Unless you all get,
No, I think it's very important,
okay.
but let's,
Ongoing maintenance verification, different ways to say it, none is the easy one. A signed statement of commitment to maintain the BMP on the application. We could have a simple fact sheet about how to maintain it. We could also, if we had their email on the application, email the BMP maintenance fact sheet each year to those that have been formally approved, or if they apply again, maybe they need to show the other installations are still present and working. So,
I kind of like that. I like them all actually, but I want to be practical. So instead of saying maybe, a checkup, like, if we put a survey out there, who's going to review the survey and compile it? I mean, really, it's work, I mean, maybe we want to, do a contest, like what are the top 3? And, there's really no prize, just bragging rights, a picture in the paper or on the website, just to get people excited about them. Maybe there is a prize. I don't know. I mean, we can get someone from the business community to donate something. Well, or a gift card.
I
Who
really
knows?
like to, in keeping it simple, first of all, I want to reemphasize to everyone, right, we are not talking about approval. You mentioned the word approval. There's no approval. If I want to go put a rain garden in, there's nothing in Radnor that stops me from it. What we're saying is they're going to get a rebate, and if you're talking about the approval of the rebate, right, because they can put a rain garden in on their own accord, there's no...
Oh, of course, these
right?
are,
So
yeah,
just- I
no,
just want- I know
approval of
you know
the
that.
rebate, yes,
I just want to be clear that the
Yeah.
general public understands.
And even that, I'm not really even envisioning approval of the rebate. It's
Right.
just a matter of just
Getting
get
it.
your paperwork in.
Right, I agree. I know you knew that. I just
Kind of
wanted to be
like a coupon. You can't say no to it.
Right, exactly. But I guess along those lines, I really like, because I dreamed it up, I really like the just emailing them every year because it's simple. It doesn't require any work by anybody on the township staff or anybody else. It's just the stormwater administrator would just keep a list and send out a simple email. Hey, great, you got your thing in last year. If you have comments, send them here. But if not, just a reminder that if you got a rain garden, you want to do this. If you have this, it could be a simple email fact sheet that just gets people prompted to think about it. And we go out in like this time of year or April, May, when you're doing your spring cleanup.
You know what, during that, on that same form, you could even ask for a current picture. Most people wouldn't mind, they'd probably be pretty proud of it. They wouldn't mind at all sending you a picture.
and it wouldn't be a bad idea on the website to submit and
So
show,
I mean, like
yeah,
we could put the
show us your rain garden, show us.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, you don't have to select the best. You can put them all.
Right,
It's a website. It doesn't really matter.
right.
How do you feel though about if someone's going to reapply for a new one that they have to show the others are in place?
I think we should address that after let's get through this first year. Let's get through
Okay,
this.
so we're
let's get
not
through
going to
this
worry
meeting.
about that. Okay, I like that response.
Because I think we're down to about 4 or 3 minutes now for Paul to.
okay, application process, mail it in or online. If we're going to do it online, I assume there's some mechanism within the township to do that.
I mean, that would have to be, I'll get to it, I was going to do it at the end. We are coming out with a new website, when I had some requests for this committee for things to post. But something like that, I don't know if staff has that ability to, create that form, provide the uplink, the upload link. And again, that may be something, our stormwater administrator obviously is putting together our GIS system. I think that would fall well within their purview to perhaps do something like that. Or we might have to pay the website company to do it.
Okay.
Could you just have could you just email it? I mean, is there any reason why you have to upload it?
We still have to figure out who it's going to.
Well,
and-
that's the next question.
But they're going to be the administrative costs we have to work
Right.
on.
At least
All
with the
right.
uploads, you can have like required fields. You can't upload unless we have your name, your address, and what that's just a little, might
Okay.
help.
Just keeping this going forward. So then the question is, what's the approval process look like? No, we didn't say approval, but we are asking them to provide certain documentation. So who is going to make sure the documentation is there? The administrator, us, or, I'm just putting it out there.
The
I
administrator.
would say the administrator.
Okay.
And again, I think in the interest of time, I don't mean to push, I think that one's like a detail that we would work.
Okay.
The legal waiver language is something that you brought up, and I think I don't know that we need to spend time on that
No.
tonight. We just need to make sure our language
Right.
is clear. How are rebates provided, whether I think that may be one we want to talk about, which is, I think we talked previously about it being simpler to just send them a check, not try to get into
Yes.
changing the billing
Right,
process.
okay.
Yes.
So I think we all agreed to that. And how will it be advertised? That was the last point. And that's
Right.
just, we had brought up, I guess there's a couple ways to do it. You could just blast it on email or put it on the website. One possibility, but there is a cost, and you have the cost here, is that, when we get the stormwater administrator, they're going to have to do billing and take over the billing from the township. And I was just thinking they could test their transition to that billing process and send out a mailer in one fell swoop. So it would have two benefits. One, you could, for the SFRs, you could check that you have all the right addresses, and B, you could publicize this, but there is a cost associated, and you list that there. There's a $3,300 cost. But I don't know, to me, to make sure it gets out to everyone in the public, I'm at the forgotten end of the township, and to be honest with you, I hear more, just because of where I live, I hear as much about Haverford as I do Radnor, just because of where I live, so it's like, my kids aren't in Radnor schools, so I would appreciate personally a mailer just or something, because I
think
would
it's
hear about
important.
it.
It's very important to publicize what we're trying to do here. And I think $3,300 the first year, because that's not a reoccurring cost. It shouldn't necessarily be a reoccurring cost. It might be. We might decide it was very effective. But it's a minimal cost to make sure everybody gets out. The word gets out to everybody.
Well, and then for the upcoming years, too, when the bills are mailed in January,
Right.
there's no reason we need an additional mailer. We can post it on the website. It can go in with the bill and say, for this upcoming year, this is key dates of when to submit the documents for it, and it wouldn't be a separate mailer.
Well, I think we should handle it almost as kind of like a public education piece as well, because then it makes it more, it's not the only way we're going to advertise this. It's just one of the ways, and we really want to get as many people informed in whatever way we can reach them.
I see Heather all ready to cut us off, but can I just?
I don't want to cut you off, because I
Well-
really do appreciate the work you did. I just know there are other things
let
that
me
I'm
just-
trying to balance.
Let me just ask one thing. I would like to just spend 1 minute summarizing what I think I heard, because I'd like us to be able to take a vote on this and move it forward, because we've worked this for a number of months now, and we really need to move forward on this. We've spent.
Yeah, so
I
do you
think,
want to
more than
just
enough
go
time.
through and summarize our consensus points
Yeah, I think
as
that
we went through?
let me just see if I captured. I think we agreed that we were going to. It was going to be $50K for the first year, which is roughly 5% of the SFR. I'm sorry, 5% of the total intake that
Joe,
Radnor had.
let me just back up. So in the proposed goals, we added Regina's goal about,
That's right, but
Okay.
but I look at that as,
Okay.
I'm just summarizing the things that I think the general public needs to know about from a that isn't an implementation detail. So 50,000 we agreed to. We agreed that at Rain Barrel with 50, with a maximum of 5, which would be $250 max. And rain gardens would be up to $250. Dry wells would be 100. Downspouts would be 50. We talked about, I think that the only other thing that I see that would really be related to anything that we really need to vote on is that I really think that we agreed, well, I want to make a point. If we agree to all that, I think it would be difficult for us to implement this process this year without having a stormwater administrator online. Because I don't know
Or would
how.
we reimburse people?
Right. So I think, with what we have here, we can get a package together and get it ready for the board as soon as you're ready, if we all agree to those numbers, and for them to vote on it. But I think the implementation really requires a stormwater administrator, or do it next year to give Steve's people and whoever the time to get it stood up. I don't know if there's a motion and all that. Regina's really good at motions and stuff.
You saw me Yeah, so I guess we're going to put a motion together to move forward the incentive program to the Board of Commissioners for their approval. We're recommending a cap of $50,000 expenditure in the first year, which is roughly 5% of our intake on the stormwater fee. We're looking at rain barrels as one of the option at $50 per rain barrel with a maximum of 5. We're looking at rain gardens with a maximum of $250. We're looking at dry wells with a maximum of $100, and downspout disconnections with a maximum of $50. And those would require receipts and photographs along with a short application to be submitted to the township for reimbursement. Is there anything more we need to put in that motion?
Say reimbursement, it's a rebate up to that
Reim-
amount, knowing that the cost could far exceed.
Right,
or it would
reimbursement of
exceed.
their expenses up to that amount, and it's materials cost we're talking about. And this would be contingent upon a stormwater administrator available to implement the program.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So do you want me to, for what Regina had just spoke for the motion, put together something that we could put in a memo? I'll send it to everyone for their input.
If you don't mind, we could, our subcommittee has all the
That'd be
paperwork.
great.
We could just do that for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks for volunteering, Joe.
That was
No
great.
problem.
Okay, running a little bit behind, but we're going to catch up. I have some photos that were submitted from residents on Banbury Way, and that would lead us, I guess, into the discussion too for item 6 for discussion of the Ithan Creek watershed and request from the BOC to look at 3 projects. And I have a jump drive. I'd like to just put some of the pictures together just to show you and some video. So here are a few. There are many photos here. And just stop me if there's something that jumps out at you. These were recent photos. They were submitted right before the last meeting.
That's Francis Avenue, for those who don't know.
Oh, this is of the Banbury Way area.
Yeah. That's Wawa on the other side of that high fence.
And Regina, this is the group that came, the husband and wife that came in.
At the last
our last
meeting.
meeting, right? Okay.
That was a brave car. Yeah, let me look here. These were taking 7/2013. Looks like some of these are duplicates. Let me see if there's... And I can jump to a video. Let me see here. A video is loading, it's just taking a moment. Okay, there we go. And if you can see, the manhole's was lifting up a moment ago. There it is.
So they're in Francis is an underground system. It's not a very big system. I don't know how it was sized. I don't know if it was just sized to fit in the street. But as you can see, it gets overwhelmed, by no means. So it definitely, at best, is for the much more frequent, smaller storms. But in something like this, it's overwhelmed.
And Steve, we'll get into this discussion more, but this was the area where you had said that a lot of this water is coming off of Lancaster Avenue, which is a state road, correct?
Some of it's coming off of Lancaster. You can see it in a rainstorm. It literally just makes the turn at the bank. But it also comes from our streets, Windsor, Banbury itself, and some of those other. So it's a combination, but it's very visible. You definitely see a path of water that comes down the pike and just takes the turn.
But this is one we could engage PennDOT on helping us, correct?
Correct. Or there's also times when we might just decide we need to do some work
I understand.
on our own and address it.
Steve, what watershed is this?
Believe
This is in the Ithan.
Yeah, this is the top of Ithan Creek, which then goes to the firehouse and then.
Steve, does it act similarly to the situation in town? I mean, I see what happens there more frequently, and I see about how long it lasts. Is it about the same thing? It's kind of like it peaks and...
It does, and when you see this, that means the firehouse is usually flooded. Or if the firehouse is flooding, this is flooding too.
So once the South Wayne is gone, this is probably gone?
Yeah, I don't know which comes
In the
first.
same...
Right, but when one is, they're both in that same category of somewhat frequent. I think I had on the one project list, depending on the year, this could happen 6 times a
Yes.
year. Not necessarily to that severity.
Right.
But very easily. And you can see, you pull in the Wawa, the mulch is all over the parking lot.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you know that's what happened.
That's what happened. And it's the same, same in South Wayne. If you drive by and you see the mulch is way up the grass. But my question is, do we catalog any of this as a township, these types of flood photos and things? Can we start to
I
build
think I showed
kind
that
of
one.
a
Let me jump down.
case for the severity of these when we were looking for partners and for
Well,
assistance?
these are like the Ms. Guthling's pictures are probably the best we have because it's one of the most severe that I've seen it. So it's great to have her photos. Again, so just one of the minor things that a GIS system does. I envision when we had an up and running GIS system that, I would have a layer on there of all the different people that have called in with issues. I don't mean minor issues, but something like this or overland flow through their backyard. And we could pull that up, print that map, or show this committee and say, look for the green parcels or look for the red parcels, and you'll see that.
That would be a good way to record this type of thing, and maybe even the frequency and that type of thing, and with photographs and things attached. I think that's
I
excellent.
track, so I can look back at rainfall intensities, but a great way to do this would be to match up what you see with what the intensity was at that time, again, and that would all get attached to that parcel or that intersection, and you could start to see a
Playing
frequency.
there.
Yes, we have swimmers.
Well, I think you made a very good point, too, is that these, a lot of times, we know the exact timing, and we really can do a good job of matching up what occurred with the end result and figure it out backwards. So at some point, I'd like to maybe even encourage residents who have that type of information to bring it forward. And would that be to that
Yeah, well, we had,
that
the-
website link?
Well-
Where would be the best place for someone to, I mean, some of these things are large, like the video, but like photos, could people email them in, or would you like hard copies?
Usually staff is the first point of contact. So we have a gentleman over on Cumberland Place who I brought to the committee, I'm going to say, I think it was 5 or 6 months ago, who had an inordinate amount of overland flow that came through his property. It was problematic for him, and some came, I traced it back, one rainstorm, a huge amount came from the golf course. A lot came from the downspouts and driveways of his neighbors, and a lot came from the driveways and downspouts of his other neighbors. So, the township staff is the start for these, and then on these more severe ones, it's for us to get them to you. But that gets back to that project list, because some of the committee honed that project list down from this to this. And some of those projects involve considerable amounts of rainwater, but maybe not to that degree. Because if you look at that photo and those photos, as problematic it is for Ms. Guthleen, maybe the bigger issue is for automobiles and pedestrians, right? Because it's going up on her lawn, but for sure, it's impeding traffic, emergency services, fire, police, ambulance, and just your average everyday pedestrian.
So would that, right now, if somebody wanted to submit information, would that be you?
Yes,
I
it
dare to
just
say.
comes to me and Leah, and we save all this and we file it. And I mean, I go out on stormwater calls, you know, I talk to residents every week. Some are things, you know, you need some filter, and some are things I think are really issues that don't need to come to this committee. They're minor, they're things that can be corrected on the street, or some are really beyond what you do and what we do, in that this person is downhill from their neighbor and they get considerable amount of water from their neighbor. And I guess there's another project I brought to you folks was Oakford, and how all the folks get a huge river in between their yards on a heavy rain. It's not attributable directly to a township pipe or the township street. So they're all, as you go down the line with more roofs and more driveways and more roofs, it gets worse and worse. So in the past, those types of problems have been considered more or less overland flow and not a township problem, because it wasn't attributable directly to a street or a stormwater discharge. But with this committee, I think you have the option or the opportunity to start to address them and say, well, maybe we're not going to expend our funds directly from the stormwater fee, but if we can get a grant and there is a match, and really the people have to help themselves and the township helps them and the grant helps them, that's a big decision. If you remember, so there was 2 projects I brought forth that were considered what I would call overland flow. The Cumberland Place and Oakford. So in the past, they were more or less items that the township really didn't deal too much with. But now I think we have the ability, if this committee and the board, the commissioners so sees fit, to start to look at them, because in those people's minds, it's still very problematic. They don't really care that the water didn't come from the street or our inlet. All they know is their backyard's a river when we get a heavy rain. So I think there's something you have to weigh in there, and we do keep all that, we catalog all that, we have that. But as that system comes on board, my thought would be that we start to attach these to the various parcels. So the GIS system via the cloud is then the keeper of that. And the great thing is anybody at any time on staff can pull that up. There's no problem, as well as the stormwater administrator, the manager or commissioner could come in. But that's the way to really start doing it, and that's the beauty of the visuals of the GIS system, that you get to start to see all that.
Well, in seeing some of the pictures of Banbury Way, that is one of the projects that we had talked about previously in the Ithan watershed. We've had a request from the board to look at picking 3 projects that we would like to look at a little closer. And
Can I just, one question. I think we need to clarify projects versus flood sites to remediate. Are we looking for 3 locations to address? Because there's not really a project currently
correct.
there. So what we're really looking to do is prioritize 3 flood sites. Is that what, Steve, is that where we are?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back, again, many months. If you folks remember, I was giving you the project list, and I rework it to whatever you required. The board's been asking for a long time for some projects, you know, physical projects, shovels in the ground. So right now, just as a synopsis, we have the Marlbridge Way culvert replacement. That's going to be done this year. The Malin Road culvert analysis is almost complete. Mill Road storm sewer replacement, it's in design. It'll be constructed this year. We have the stormwater management ordinance rewrite. The cleaning, televising, locating, which is in bid. The township-wide culvert analysis, which is phased over several years. The North Wayne Field Basin, which is currently in design. Continuing MS4 compliance. The Wayne Train Station stormwater management project. We have the Radnor Township Rain Garden, thanks to this gentleman right here. And the South Wayne Middle School, School Lane, Windermere feasibility study by CVE. So I think, and we have a commissioner right here, what I've been asking this committee was for 3 projects. We've got a lot of projects, but
But really, what you're not really asking for projects, because we don't have projects. You're asking for us to
Well, you do.
select 3 locations to put a design together for a construction project.
absolutely.
So when you say projects, it's not as if there really is a project. What we're looking at
Well,
is
you would
3
make those 3
locations
spots a project.
to address.
Right, and now the last time we met, or 2 times ago, this was done the committee had voted to do a watershed analysis, right, before moving forward. So,
Wait, before you continue, I think we're kind of all asking for the same and saying the same thing. I think
Well-
we kind of picked 3 locations in the Ithan watershed.
well, that's what
Isn't
I'm
that-
saying, because the
So we're all kind of
watershed,
talking, but just with different terminology.
well, what the watershed, working with Dan Weibel here, and again, Stormwater Administrator side or not, we can still receive a proposal from them, and we can still go to the board and ask them to approve it, if this board approves it. So Dan has put together a draft proposal, which includes the watershed analysis that this committee requested. And more importantly, as part of it, you pick 3 projects that come out of this study, and they come in, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my, and Dan's here, so that's always good. So there was 4 parts to the proposal: the flooding analysis, the identification of possible solutions, prioritization of flooding location, and development of concept plans. So the proposal, I think, hits everybody's spot that they were looking to hit. The Stormwater Management Advisory Committee gets a watershed analysis. Out of that analysis, you could recommend 3 specific locations to Dan, and what he would provide is a conceptual plan, a solution that you would look at, and a proposed cost. So you have that for 3 areas. That could be Banbury, South Wayne, and the culverts. From there, you say, wow, we have a list to pick from. And then you could ask CH2M Hill or any other company to take that and say, okay, we want to go to design and construction. But
Could I, if you wouldn't mind, because I really, appreciate all the comments, but I think we just need to back up a minute, if you wouldn't mind. So we were established, and our first meeting was in January or February of 14? February of 14. And I wrote a quick list, and you tell me how right I am. North Wayne, first of all, it's in First Ward. Who the hell knows what it's going to be when you redistrict or whatever you're doing, but it's in First Ward right now. This board
I'm sorry, I don't know. I can't correlate a project to a ward.
I'm pretty sure, but it doesn't matter. North Wayne, First Ward, this board has had nothing to do with that officially. That was done and approved before we were established, so only from.
Yeah, we didn't weigh in at all on that.
Just so we're all clear and on the public record. Second project that I'm aware of that's large is Shimoni. That was an emergency thing that occurred right about the time that our board was formed. That's on the border of First and Second Ward, and that's another stormwater. And I think at least that second one, stormwater funds from the stormwater fee were used for that.
For Shimoni, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Then, since that time, what I have in my notes is that we recommended and 3 projects were approved by the Board of Commissioners. Mallbridge, which is in Fourth, and Mill and Malin, which are in Fifth. And the only one that I wasn't sure of, Steve, was what we did with the SEPTA lot, whether we actually gave the Board of Commissioners a letter on that, or that was just, that's gone on because it's a cost share with SEPTA.
That was where SEPTA gave us $100,000 towards construction, and the township's portion was design. And I had it from the meeting that it was to go to Gannett Fleming. That did go to Gannett Fleming, and as a matter of fact, I have an update for you. I met with them today out in the field on some, I think there's some pretty good ideas for that area.
Great, great. So I'm not a I'm an engineer, not a stormwater expert, but I'm a pretty good math guy. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, actually 6 projects, right? 6 projects, 14 months is what, about 1 or 2 projects every couple months. So we've put a lot of things forward to the Board of Commissioners, and some that were already ongoing, but there has been a number of efforts either ongoing or starting to address stormwater. Now, the next step is that our committee has spent and this is just trying to catch everybody up, that we've spent the last couple months talking about taking a more broad view of trying to look at the 3 watersheds. And when we took a look at those 3 watersheds, we said that the Itham watershed was by far our biggest contributor and really the area we should focus in first. And we did that ward agnostic, because we were trying to address not a specific ward's problems or trying to address equity. We were trying to address stormwater in Radnor and getting the best for our money in reducing the stormwater issue in Radnor as a whole. Just like we would want to put money into a high school for better computers, right? Stormwater as a whole, not what's going on where I live on Highland Lane, right? So now with that, I think to try to capitalize on what Regina was saying, Regina was struggling between what are we calling a project, because up until tonight, our recent talk has been about an approach where we look at a watershed and then based upon what comes out of the study of the watershed would last for anywhere from 3 to 6 months, we would start programs in that watershed to address flooding. Now,
And I like the word programs,
Right.
because that's more encompassing.
And so let's use the word program now. And then as far as projects, we have heard.
Joe, would you just, I was typing, so
Oh, sure.
program means,
Program is what we called the 3, really it's a watershed, right? But the first of the 3 watershed studies, which is a program, is the Itham watershed. That's the one we decided upon. We basically, we were at the point where when we talked about the stormwater administrator as of last month, we were even going to kick that off with that program. And I think I'd like to just begin to try to keep semblance here that I think we all still agree that starting a stormwater program assessment of the Itham watershed remains something that we want to recommend. So I'd like to make a motion for that.
and just to clarify, maybe Regina could speak better to this, but we're talking about a very nuts and bolts, measurement-oriented, this is not a survey of residents,
No.
this is a very specific engineering requirement, set of data that we need.
Exactly, and let's because you bring up a very good point, and since I have the floor, I just want to, again, try to capture what we've been doing. So on the stormwater administrator, we need to also make assured that we understand what we did there as a committee. So as a committee there, an original RFP came in, and we challenged the staff here to look at what they really needed, and we met with Dan's folks and talked about what we really need in Radnor, and we were able to reduce the proposed RFP amount almost in half. And in doing that, we also challenged Dan to come up with an RFP for us for the specific program. So, and out of the graciousness of his heart in trying to win the contract, he did that to us for free. So we have a basic RFP that we're ready to almost go with, and that's what Steve's referring to. So
Actually, the commission asked me with Dan sitting here to get a proposal from him.
That's
So
right.
it went beyond the RFP, it went to a physical proposal.
Right. So I just wanted to catch everybody up. So now that we're, okay, so now we have an RFP from Dan that will, and I think we've even seen it and liked it. So now with the stormwater administrator, which has already been booked as a letter that we're sending to the Board of Commissioners, I would like to make a motion that we send a second letter to the Board of Commissioners that would request that the stormwater administrator, specifically who is selected, also initiate the study for Itham Water Creek.
Well, Madam Chairman, could I interject here? I didn't want to say anything
Sure.
here, but I think the last thing the Board of Commissioners wants is another study.
I think there's
what
a terminology issue that we need to
I think what the Board of
address.
Commissioners wants from you is discrete project recommendations. We have photographs that are very telling. There are photographs in the Township archives from the firehouse. We have problems crying out for solutions. We don't need another programmatic study of our watersheds. We need recommendations from this committee for our Board of Commissioners to act positively, aggressively, and quickly.
Well, I appreciate, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because when we talked about the study, and since we got the feedback from the commissioners, we also have talked about, and I think I would like to recommend that we motion on this, and then I certainly want to make other motions about specific projects, not programs, but projects that could be done in parallel with the study, because I think there is enough good my personal opinion, there is enough good documentation on at least several projects that could be implemented now in parallel with the larger Ith and Water Creek study. And I think in that way we get the best of both worlds, because I don't think we need a study to show us that we have a problem at Francis and Banbury Way. I'm sorry, I just don't see, not that I don't think that the solution couldn't be more encompassing in the long run, and we could do additional things to further alleviate that problem. That's my personal opinion. But I'd like to at least start with just where we were before, that we do want to study and look at it at a creek level or at a watershed level.
And I just want to make the point in general that we have incredible expertise on this panel who's recommending this step because it does something that needs to be done according to the professional expertise. And so I don't know if Regina, you want to speak to that? That would be very helpful.
Well, I think terminology is where we're having our stumbling block, because when you say recommend 3 projects and there aren't any projects to recommend, in my opinion, what you're really saying to me is recommend 3 sites to remediate. But when you say projects, there aren't any. There needs to be a feasibility and a design and permitting and bidding for construction before you can have a project. So I think we're all talking about the same things, using different words, and we need to get on the same platform. So the Ithan Creek initiative, let's call it, because that doesn't mean anything, is prioritizing those 3 flood sites, which we know exist at Banbury, at South Wayne, and is it Midland Avenue? What specifically is downstream?
I think you were talking about the culverts here on Ivan Avenue.
Ivan
That was the
Avenue.
other part.
Thank you for straightening me out. Ivan Avenue. Those are the 3 locations with severe flooding that's known and problematic and documented and impacts many of our residents. That's why we chose to look at those 3 sites together, because it's a system. And the work that you do on one of those may impact the other. And in order to get the most effective use of our funds, looking at all 3 together, because they are critical, we want to go forward and take a look at solutions. We're not looking for someone to tell us that we have a problem that we already know about. We're looking for someone to figure out what's causing the problem in a very specific way, generate potential solutions, look at the feasibility and the cost of those solutions, and the best way to go forward to remediate those sites. So that's a totally different thing than I think what people are thinking when they hear Ithan Creek study.
Could I add to that? Then I thought the last part, we would also be expecting that same contractor, who we hope would be our stormwater administrator, to then develop RFPs for Steve to go initiate once he got board approval for a specific project or
I agree with what you're
remediation area.
I agree with what you're saying. However, say the project goes such that you find there's absolutely nothing to be done about one of these that's within our budget, then you wouldn't go for an RFP for that. You'd move on to something in North Wayne and you'd put that one on the shelf and look for other ways. But assuming that we have the budget to address those issues within our means, then yes, those would go forward as construction projects once they get to that point.
What I'd like to ask this commission to look at, so Dan Weibel has put together, based on last month, the commission asked him to come up with a not a request for proposal, but an actual proposal. So Dan has a draft proposal. I'm going to ask him in a moment, if it's okay with this committee, to just hit the 4 bullet points from 50,000 feet on his proposal. If this committee likes what it hears, I will have him formalize that, attach his prices to that, and then that would come back to you. You would all see it at public meeting. You could vote and give me a memo, yay or nay, to take it to the Board of Commissioners. But I think, based on what I'm hearing, you need a chance to soak up what's in the proposal and see if it meets what you're talking about. I think it does. But Dan, if it so pleases this board, literally a 2-3 minute explanation of your draft, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Okay, 2 to 3 minutes. Good evening, Dan Weibel, CH Swim Hill. So I've heard a lot of different perspectives on this subject. I think we tried to address a lot of those perspectives. I do understand that the outcome should be actual projects, so we tried to really focus on that. So as Steve mentioned, we have 4 tasks that we've outlined. The first is a flooding analysis. This may be partially, Regina, something along the lines of, telling you what you already know, understandably. But this is running CH Swim Hill's own flood modeling software, which can really highlight a lot of the locations you know, but there may be others that aren't so obvious. And we can also kind of categorize the severity of those flooding locations. We can cut off those locations that are below a certain threshold, negligible flooding, really nuisance, very minor nuisance flooding, and really look at like those areas that are the most significant. So task 1 is basically running a model, and we've already set up this model during the period where we were interviewing and the request for the RFP, the draft RFP. So we have most of the models already set up. Really just needs to be refined. Task 2, as Steve mentioned, is really, this is sort of a standalone task, and this is really taking a step back and looking at a very high level programmatic type approach for the watershed. We wanted to look at categories of solutions, what types of categories could work where, and this could be, just for example, things like the backyard BMPs that has come up before, enhanced conveyance measures, whether it's larger pipes or larger stream channels or what have you. So it's green streets. That's another thing. Which streets in the township or in the watershed could be greened with BMPs? So it's trying to look at it at a very high level, categorize different types of solutions. So sort of a standalone task. We could tailor that to the more significant flooding problems and more significant flooding watersheds or sub-watersheds. We didn't want to be too prescriptive in this. We know that this needs to be somewhat of an organic process. We want to work with you guys to really tailor it, and it could change. Obviously, we need to scope it. We need to put a price to it. But we do realize that this is something that is going to be organic and evolve to some extent. The third task is, I think, really getting to something that I've seen you guys work quite a bit on, at least I think last summer, prioritizing flooding locations. And Regina, we struggled quite a bit writing this because it's the difference between prioritizing flooding problems and prioritizing projects, which don't really exist. So at one point we had a whole task for, let's develop, dozens of project concepts. And then the problem is they need to be developed enough that you can prioritize those and really evaluate those. And then that spirals, into a much, much bigger study than I think we can really afford to do here. So I think it needs to be right size, and that's what we're trying to do. So it's taking a look at the most significant flooding locations, and it's prioritizing those. So not just severity of flooding, but looking at number of properties affected, economic impacts, a lot of the things you guys looked at before on that list of projects. So that's what task 3 is. We talk about a workshop, getting everyone together, possibly the public gets together. It could really vary depending on how big and significant you want this effort to be. But that's what we envision Task 3. And then Task 4 is essentially the punchline. It's getting to those 3 projects. So it's, and again, we didn't want to be too prescriptive. We left it fairly open. That would be a process where it would work with you, and you would help determine what those projects would be. Most likely, it's going to be the 3, I would think, most significant flooding problems. But we would essentially deliver concept plans, as Steve mentioned, detailed enough so you would have a cost, you would know what the benefits would be, and you could hand it over to another consultant to deliver design plans. So that was the idea. I do want to mention that, we were conceiving of lots of different types of potential solutions. I don't think there's a silver bullet that's going to solve maybe any single one problem. I think we've talked about, systems of solutions. I really want to emphasize that. So when I say solution, it's not necessarily eliminating flooding, but hopefully greatly reducing the flooding and linking to other types of projects. So that was more than 3 minutes. I apologize.
Could I
It's
ask?
going to come off the proposal.
Sure.
So Dan, are these sequential? Are any of these in parallel?
These tasks?
Yeah.
With the exception of Task 2, which I mentioned, we struggled with where that goes. It is sequential. It's meant to be sequential. Again, Task 2 is more of stepping back, higher level. How do we categorize programs? And again, it could be based on the analysis in Task 1. In fact, we may decide, let's really just focus on these areas in the Ithing Creek watershed. But it is meant to be sequential.
The only concern I have is that the end result is 3 projects. Is that necessarily locked in place? It may be that there needs to be 5 projects, or there needs to be 2, or there are 3 sites that we need to do work to remediate, but it takes 10 projects. How are we getting that 3 projects?
That's a great question. We tried to balance, the getting to those 3 projects versus, we need the appropriate level of effort to actually do those 3 concepts. I recognize you may want to do more than 3 concepts. Maybe it's less of the analysis and more like just give us more project concepts. And if that's what you're ultimately looking for, that's certainly something that we could develop.
How do you guys feel about that? I'd rather not lock into 3 large construction projects if that's not our best
But
fit.
I don't think they're asking to lock in. I just think we need to start moving forward on known problem areas, like looking at Banbury Way. That's been that way for years now, and it's been a lot of projects like that have sat. So I don't want to rush the process, but I don't see why.
But you did hear at the end he was going to recommend 3 projects as part of this.
But that doesn't mean we have to. We can recommend these are 3 areas that are known to flood, and that we will work with our stormwater administrator to put forth a study that makes sense to come back to us with here are 3, here are 5, here are 2 things that you could do to solve flooding. And we could decide at a later date, 2 of them will work, 1 of them will work, 5 of them will work. And then we can sit down and figure out budget-wise where we are for that year with where our impact fee is, how much money's left, and decide. There might be 5 projects, and we can afford 2 next year. That doesn't mean...
As long as we're giving the direction at this time, because now is when we're receiving the proposal, that it's not necessarily set in stone 3 projects.
Couldn't it be a
Can I
different-
back up
couldn't it-
here? I just want to make the point, and I think I see this very clearly. It's a system problem. It's the Ithing Creek watershed. Whether or not Banbury Way, how Banbury Way gets fixed, it seems to me to depend on what the whole system does. So why wouldn't that happen first?
Well, my question is this, why
Well,
couldn't...
could I have a question? Could I have an answer to that from Dan?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
Yes, so my understanding is that at first, we need a systems look at the whole watershed. Once we have that, then what happens in Banbury Way will be impacted by what's upstream, what happens at at South Wayne is going to depend on what happens in Banbury. So don't we need that first?
Sure, and that's kind of where we start with the flooding analysis. Now, we can kind of swap tasks 1 and 2. We can take a higher level look at what we think is feasible where, what we think are the best types of solutions where, and then kind of go into the flooding analysis. We thought it made sense to do the model first,
Yeah,
and then
it
follow
makes
from
sense to
there.
me. This rush to get to specific, I'll use the word projects, seems premature.
Well, may I ask a question? So could we possibly, and Dan, I don't mean to make your head spin, so could we say to you, as a consultant, we have flooding issues in the Ithan Creek watershed. Specifically, we have problems at Banbury. Specifically, we have a real big problem at South Wayne Avenue, which is where our emergency responders come to and from all the time. We have another problem over on Ivan Avenue where we have additional emergency responders. Not to handcuff you, but we need to solve these 3 problems. Put together a proposal on how you would do that. If that includes a watershed study and additional modeling, fantastic. But the end, and I know where Regina's coming from, but we know we have specific areas that we want to address. And maybe there's 5 others, maybe there's 10 others that your modeling will bring forth. But don't we know that we have these 3, whether it be in this watershed or pick another one, we have these very specific issues. So we're not telling you how to fix it. We're not telling you anything at all other than you need to come back to this committee with a proposal that will, in the end, provide solutions to these issues. And those solutions might be a mile away from where the problem lies, okay?
Yeah, I think, again, it's just a matter of terminology. We all want the same thing, and we're just getting to that point where we're realizing we're all talking about the same thing and using different words. So it's not about 3 projects. It's about getting these 3 known flood sites remediated however best, once we get a handle on what's causing them and how to fix them, and how we can afford that, and whether it's constructible, and what kind of permitting, and et cetera, et cetera.
Could I and this isn't in deference to anybody, but my big eye-opener since joining this committee is how long it takes to do things. And I really, I don't mean that disparagingly about anybody here, and certainly don't mean it disparagingly about Steve, because Steve's dealing with the process and the hands he's been dealt with. But the bottom line is, if Dan were great enough and like engineer of the century, he's a Villanova guy, so we're expecting that, but if he were like engineer of the century and he said, here's your solution, I think, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, I think it would take us 6 months as a community to decide to do something, no matter how hard the commissioners are clamoring for it. So I guess the reason I bring all that to the forefront is I think if we agree that it's going to take a long while, I don't see why we couldn't do things in parallel. Tell Dan that there's 3 problem areas that Steve has identified, and I think we all agree with for the very reasons. 2 are emergency related. 1 we've seen video of, and you know, I've been in this area a long while. That same flooding was going on in the 80s at that location, at the Wawa, when I was there in high school. So it's not like it's something that's new. And we let him go off and work a solution, his team work a solution for that to the point where we'd be ready to put out RFPs, with the knowledge that, and the understanding that those designs could get tweaked along the way as his parallel study looked at a broader base thing. Because
I think the study is coming up with those solutions. If you don't know what causes the flooding, you can't fix it. It's a small step in the process of getting what exactly you're asking for. They're not in parallel, they're in order, and it's figure out what's happening, figure out how to fix it, and then push it to design.
But again, I from an engineer, we're engineers, I agree with you, but you need to think like a politician or a government person. They're not in parallel, because he's going to do a study, and we're going to get the study in October.
No, we're not getting a study in October.
No, well, whenever.
We're getting the whole thing when it's done.
Regina, pick a date. We're going to get it in June. Then we're going to meet a couple times, and it takes 2 months for us, because of the Radnor process, for us to get a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. It takes 2 months.
I guess what I'm saying
So wait a minute,
is,
so wait, let me just, so
Okay.
now, he's going to give us something in July, then we're going to spend 3 more months, and then it's going to be Christmas, and then next year, we're going to decide we want to do these 3 programs, because we now have enough data, and it's going to take another 3 months for our recommendation to get to the board, because of all these gaps in the process. So my only point to you is we can't think like engineers in a process like this. We really need to think like politicians and government people, which is you have to do things in parallel, because in the end, there's such a long process in getting something approved that you're going to have plenty of time to meld it along the way. And I really believe that, just because.
I understand what you're saying about the timing, and I totally get the frustration. However, I've never in my life designed something without the information necessary to come up with an appropriate solution that's cost-effective and responsible. And without having data, I can't just say, Dan, I want this size basin and put it at this lot, and I really don't care if it requires wetland mitigation or whether or not we even own the property. It's just not an option. You have to
Why
know
can't we
what
let
you're.
the consultant tell us how to fix the problem? And that's
Yes.
my thing.
That's
So-
what I'm.
Well, we
but
just
I'm
say,
saying
here's the areas.
we're looking to remediate these 3 flood sites.
Right.
Is that what we're looking to do? I
We-
think that's what we're looking to do.
My thought is, we have 3 big problems in the township, and they've been problems for decades.
years.
Many decades, and.
And
I've
we have
driven-
more than 3. Quite honestly, we have
Right.
more than 3.
But in that
we've
watershed that
selected
you
these 3
identified.
in particular
Right.
because it is a system. So why pick one from North Wayne and one from South Wayne, which have no relation with each other, and do them at the same time? Doesn't make as much sense as picking the 3 that lead one to the next, and that's what we're
Well,
looking to
I
do.
agree, but why don't we just toss it to the consultant and say, put together a proposal to solve these problems? We're all,
But that involves the model.
but let him tell us that. We're dictating that. We're all engineers. I know when I get a problem, you don't want somebody to tell you how to solve it. Just say, okay, if Dan thinks we need the model, which I do think we need, let him do it. But I think
Well,
we're
as long
going
as he doesn't
backwards.
pick the Pannoni report out of
Yes.
the recycling bin and say, this is what we're going to do, because we're crunching him to, tomorrow we want design plans.
I
mean,
agree.
And
I'm
we
just
can't
throwing it
be
a different way.
irresponsible and expect a design without the data to drive the design.
Just respectfully suggesting that.
I kind of have to agree with Joe. I think that there's a way that we can work together and do this parallel and work with a very experienced storm.
No
hopefully-
parallel. There's no, okay, design today and model it next month, because you've already designed it. And on what basis?
You can work.
It would have to come out of the old Pannoni
All
report.
right, motion, lady, you ready for
You
your
know, I
motion?
have- Joe,
I'm going to make a
All right, wait,
motion.
can we-
Hang on a second.
Hear from Charles, because Charles hasn't.
I haven't said much
Yeah.
during the meeting, but let's go back to when we started this. When I first came on board, we were given a task of prioritizing all of the projects that were out there that Steve had identified. And the problem that we had is none of us understood what caused the stormwater to be a problem at each one of those project sites. We looked at it and we said, well, okay, if we do this, what happens? We couldn't prioritize it. So we said, well, let's get somebody on board, and then we'll do a study and try and understand how stormwater flows through Radnor Township. Where we are, here we are a year later, we don't know how stormwater flows through Radnor Township. We're being asked to come up with 3 projects. We don't know what constructing solutions to those 3 projects would do elsewhere. I think the only way we can go is that we have to be able to look at what is causing the problems in this watershed. And remember, we chose to look at a watershed versus looking at individual projects, because it's watersheds that established the system. So,
But isn't that what he said in the first thing that Dan said, is that would be part of this? It would be running analysis
yes.
for flood analysis.
So
And
why
can't
would
we
you
go in?
Why would you skip that step?
But we're not skipping that step. That was
That's what I'm hearing from Joe. Skip that step and give me a
No.
So
What Joe is
Could you
saying
do
is
me a
when.
f-
So
could I
we're
do
not
that, Jim?
communicating
I'd like
well.
to, I'd
So
like to
that's
say
what-
something. I would like to say something. we've been working with Dan. Dan understands the problem. I don't understand with the 4 things that he outlined for the flood analysis, looking at a high-level approach, which is exactly what you're talking about, keeping in mind that these are 3 areas we feel that we would like to really focus because of the severe flooding. I don't understand, knowing the back of his mind those 3 projects, why he can't move forward with that flood analysis.
What do you mean by move forward with that? I'm agreeing with what he has laid out. Are you saying he needs to skip 1 and 2 and go
No.
straight to 3 and 4? That's why I'm
No.
confused. Is that what you're saying, Joe?
No, what I am
I'd
saying.
like to make a motion.
I'm not ready to vote on a
Try
motion
my
unless I
motion, and then
understand
if you
it.
don't like it, I'd like to make a motion that we vote for the following. We vote for a study of that we would recommend to the Board of Commissioners 2 things. The study of the Ithan watershed at a cost of up to $50,000 by our stormwater administrator, who we've already recommended to you, and a recommendation that up to $500,000 be approved to spend on Ithan watershed remediation projects. And that number could grow or decrease, and we will come back to you when that grows or decreases, and we'll keep you up to speed monthly. Further, I'd like to make that motion that be brought to the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday night, not 3 months from now.
I could second that.
I like the idea of it, and I'm having a little hard time with the numbers and how they came to be.
Yeah, I
guess.
I just don't think you're getting the point. Joe, you hit on it earlier, that we have a political problem. The 7 elected commissioners have to be responsive to our constituents. We don't want another study. You can combine a study with a recommendation of 3 sites, but we need to have, you call them sites, I'll agree with you, Regina. We need to have in our hands very soon 3 locations where we can remediate problems. And I don't think we need to study the entire Ithan Creek watershed for this committee to give us that information. I think you can do it now. I think you can make the recommendation to us and let us act. And if you don't do it that way, I don't know what will happen.
Jim, with all due respect, we have professional engineers on this, and I'm not one of them, who are telling us what should be done. You're a lawyer. I respect your opinion in the law. Why don't you respect their opinion about how this should happen?
I think it's unclear what a study actually is. I don't think study is the right word here. I think it's a feasibility of remediation of flood sites in Ithan Creek watershed. That's what we're looking at here. So you're looking at Ithan Creek watershed being those 3 flood sites that we've discussed. How are we going to remediate those flood sites effectively within our budget? That's what we're looking at.
I'm sorry, I need to ask a question, since I put the motion up, and I'd like to leave it up. We're not finished, but I'd like to ask Steve a question. With the motion that I just requested, and I'll repeat it, we would request a study, and in parallel, we would request that the Board of Commissioners approve the funding of up to $500,000 be spent for the remediation of 3 or more projects in the Ithan watershed. Do you feel that gives you the proper authority to then go forward and put out RFPs? Or could we draft language that would allow you to do that, that would stop us from this goat rope of going back and forth for months and months to get things done?
Okay, so usually the Board of Commissioners is looking for a memo from this board, from this commission, to go with my legislative memo, where it explains your thoughts, your process, what you want to do. My thought would be, you receive a proposal from CH2M Hill for, in whatever way this committee wishes to receive that proposal. Take that proposal, you could have it, Dan's worked on it, we could have it before the meeting next month. Unfortunately, again, we're working on a monthly cycle. You read it, review it, mark it up. Next month you meet and you decide that you wish to move forward with this proposal, whatever that proposal is. I then take that memo and that proposal and go to the board. I think you're blindly, I don't mean blindly, but I think you're to attach that $500,000 price tag before we really know what's going on, I would hold off on that. I would try to get the design, the study, the work done, however that needs to be done, whatever for this commission. And then as part of that, you're going to get, whatever way that's done, you're going to get solutions or a solution or solutions with price tags. Take that and say, we, the Stormwater and Management Advisory Committee, would like to go with A, D, and E for this total cost, and we want CH2 M Hill to design them, and we take that to the board. If they say yay, Jan jumps on it.
Well, I guess it's the part of the proposal back and forth for 2 months I'm struggling with. I want to go to the Board of Commissioners on Monday night and request the ability to spend $50,000 to go have him do a study. And the fact that we need to work the details internally, I think should be allowed to us.
Stop saying study.
I think you have a lot of details to work
It's
out
the
just
three-
in
it's the-
semantics.
We're talking about remediating 3 flood
That's right,
sites.
that's right.
With a budget of $50,000.
And at the same time,
Can we drop the 500,000 until we
No.
see data from
No.
the study?
No, we can't, because I want to put, I agree that we need to move forward, and I want to put the Board of Commissioners, they haven't even come as a group and talked to us about what our role is yet. So I want to put,
Can we-
no, I'm
okay.
sorry. No,
No.
let me finish.
Can I add one thing?
I have a motion outstanding. I recommend that we request the Board of Commissioners authorize us to spend $500,000 for 3 projects, and they're the 3 projects we all know about, but to do that, we need to smartly go do that. And as a committee, I completely agree that the first step of that is a study. But I want it approved now, because why should we waste $50,000 if they're not going to say that they're going to be willing to spend the $500,000? We know that we need to spend money, and 500 could be a rough order of magnitude. It could be $1 million, it could be $50,000. But we need a commitment that they're willing to spend at least a half a year of our budget to fix the problems in Wayne that we know exist. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I guess my question to you is that construction cost, design cost, all encompassing?
All of the above is a first level.
So it's a cap of 500,000 is already been approved,
It's
and
a-
anything to exceed would go back to the board?
Exactly, and it's a rough order magnitude
So
for
a
everything.
starting
and
point.
And we expected that it could very possibly
Okay,
grow.
now I understand. Finally, it clicked, what you're going for. So we're making this motion
There was a second.
for Monday. Is that even,
If
do
you
we even
give me
have the
appropriate wording-
capability?
If you give me the appropriate wording, I'll take it to them. I'll ask that it be
Steve,
put on the
Is
commission.
it something,
What we're trying to avoid here is exactly what we came into. There is no roadmap as to how to go forward on this. Years of studies, and nobody has come up with a roadmap that says this is where the problem initiates, this is how we start to move down the process. We go from one watershed to the next watershed in the township. We don't have that. We need it. If we do something at one of these sites, we may create a bigger mess at another site. We're not sure about that.
I understand, but again, and I do mean this with the most respect, so I count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a bunch of engineers, another one over there. So you could stick some parameters on Dan Weibel and say, we want these areas addressed. So what I think, and again, this personal opinion, what I think this committee is getting into, you're getting into the nuts and bolts when we could leave that to him. So you could say, here's the issues we have. In a programmatic, systematic way, Dan, provide us with solutions. And that solution that he comes up with may include the modeling, may include a watershed study, but the onus is on him. And I think we have, everybody wants the same thing. And I believe there's a semantics issue in a big way, because it's actually confusing me over here. But my thought would be, we have problems, and part of his job would be to solve said problems, whatever they are, knowing that we can cause no harm downstream in doing so. That's a parameter that's put on him. If enlarging these culverts is going to flood out somebody below, we're not going to do that. But I think, so that's just my suggestion, that you could ask Dan or any consultant or consultants to basically come up with a method, show you that methodology of what they're going to do, and the end result is suggestions with prices for design and construction that this committee can pull and recommend.
And I just, when we talk about analysis, the one thing that I would like to see changed on his proposal is I would expect that with the motion that we're bringing forward, the output of his proposal would be RFPs that you could go execute. But they would be based on sound engineering judgment of looking at the entire watershed, and they would be prioritized, and we would have rough cost associated with them. So then we could go to the township and said, hey, you gave us $500K to look at the Itham watershed, to look at these 3 problem areas. They've recommended this. I'm going to go execute those because you've already told me I can go spend that money. And we get out of this 5-month rat race to get things approved because they've already approved and allocated dollars for you to go put those RFPs on the street. And that gives him a deliverable to you that you can then go use directly. Because to me, the deliverable that he should be providing is an analysis, but it's also actionable RFPs that you can go execute.
So, Joe, are you withdrawing your,
Clarifying my motion.
so you still have the 50K and the 500K as 2 separate items?
But the work is really not an Itham Creek study. What it is, it's a concept plan to remediate the flood sites within Itham Creek.
I think I would call it an RFP execution process, if you want to say that. We know we need to go fix things, but as part of doing that, to do good engineering and come up with the right solutions and to develop the RFPs in the proper manner and to understand the dollars associated and the benefits they provide, the RFP machine needs to do analysis on the front end, but the output should be RFPs that he can go execute. But we would understand what the solutions would be at a watershed level from a systematic approach. I mean,
We would be briefed throughout the process.
Absolutely. And
So
the
it's
Board of
not as if
Commissioners-
he's going to come to us with
Nope.
RFPs that we're going to say, wow, we didn't
Nope.
like those.
Nope, and the
We're
Board of
involved.
Commissioners, because we still
Okay.
want to, we have a few
All
things
right,
other to talk about.
I'm
but-
on board, I got
But we
you.
want, but we also want to improve our communications with the Board of Commissioners. So they would, every meeting, they would be, Steve would have a memo from us that would list where we are with things, and we keep things very apprised of where we are and where we aren't.
The only thing I would say is $500,000 is too low a figure. But if it's a commitment, and it's conveyed
Well,
that, I don't want,
it's a little too early to worry about
I just don't want to
dollars.
misrepresent
Yeah.
the solution as being that inexpensive.
As long as you move along the way, Joe, you pronounce it Shaney?
Shaney.
Shaney. The way he's thinking and talking, as long as you move along that way, I think you'll have a receptive audience with the Board of Commissioners. It may not come out exactly the way you're proposing it, Joe, but I think it will be received positively. And but I wouldn't worry about whether the 500 is the right number, too high or too low, or even any number should be in there. But give us something, and I think you'll see some action on our end.
As long as we're not sending the message that for $500,000, we're going to fix those 3 problems.
So
I'd like
good.
to associate a dollar value. I appreciate the comment.
I like
Just-
that
dollar
as the, to
value.
start
But I think
figure.
I like your at least, because I think we know for sure that
It's going to exceed.
It's going to be, and I think we could even put words in there that we expect this to be a multi-year effort. This is not going to be.
Right, it will be, for sure.
So
So you want to read
let's get the motion. So if we take a motion and we vote, and we put this in a memo,
You won't have, I don't know that you'll have time. If Mr. Bergmeyer is the Secretary Extraordinaire, if you just give me the wording of that motion,
something that we can present,
That
if
I
not
will
in a
put it-
memorandum, but to talk about
I'll
next
put it in
Monday.
my legislative memo and run forward with it. But I would really request that it's, because like I say, there's so much semantics, really request that we nail down what your motion is, and I'll
Okay.
bring that to the board, saying that it was voted on 4-3,
And that will be
6-0,
enough.
whatever it
Okay.
is.
And how about if I work on wording here for a minute while we keep rolling along to get us out of here? Because it'll only take me a couple minutes.
Yeah, I think if you just
Yeah,
basically capture it with the clear notion
Yep.
that we're preparing the RFPs, as you
Got it.
say.
I'll come up with wording in a minute.
Okay, so the last 2 agenda items were protocol for coordination and communication with the BOC. I don't know if you want to get into that tonight, or we want to put that and think about that on the next agenda?
Just briefly, I would like to have a regular update, at least quarterly, on their agenda.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to see it at
Every
after
every
every
month,
one of
every
our
2
meetings.
months, every
After every
month.
one of our meetings, I think we should
It should be
prepare
an
for
update.
Steve an update of our activities and what we're working on and what, like a look
All right, that's a
forward.
no-brainer. Steve could just present it.
And then Steve would have it, and if questions came
Yeah.
up, he could,
I think that'd be great. I think the board would love that.
That's an easy way.
Okay.
Yeah,
Could
I like
just
that.
clarify, I mean, aren't there reports from committees to the BOC each month?
When they sit on the committee,
Oh, okay.
So like with the planning commission, they get the planning commission minutes, and from that, they glean their thoughts on a project, but there's no actual report. I think that's a fantastic idea.
in addition, I'd like to monthly present our status to the Planning Commission, if everyone is good with that. I mean, we could use the same information. If we're preparing it for the Board of Commissioners, I'll also share that with the Planning Commission.
That'd be great. We also, I don't want to jump too fast if anyone else has something to say for coordination. And this might be an ongoing thing that as we keep going forward, that, if there's anything that jumps out that we want to include as part of this protocol and communication, let me know. The next month's meeting, there is a conflict with this room. But I was assured it would be the last time that would happen. So, the question, while Joe is finishing, is to set the meeting date. So our next meeting would have been on the 9th of April. So my question to you is, would you like to move it to another Thursday? Or was this month?
Oh, we had another date thrown out there, did we?
We had the 13th. With the Monday, the 13th, I threw out there, but I didn't hear back from
And
everyone.
this room was available and everything,
This
right?
This room
That
is
works for
available.
me.
Yeah.
So we'll set it for Monday, the 13th. Is that okay with you, Joe? Monday, the 13th? This is the last month we're going to have to reschedule for.
Yeah, I could be good then. I would schedule it, and if I can't make it, I can't make it.
Okay.
I may be on travel, but.
Okay. For now, we will schedule it for then the Monday, the 13th, and that should be the last conflict.
The other issue that I wanted to bring up, if Joe's still working over there, is to start a subcommittee for grants and partnerships. And just to give a little background, it would be a subcommittee of this committee to make recommendations for grants that might be worth pursuing and partnerships that would be worth developing. And I know we've been talking about this for a long time, and I don't know if you're still interested. Both of you initially had said grants would be something. So can we just start the ball rolling on a subcommittee then, and it would be the three of us, and we would invite people with expertise to also join that?
I totally agree, yes.
Okay, so do we need to make a motion do we have to make a motion to
I don't think
start
for
a
a subcommittee,
subcommittee?
no. But
Okay.
it's in the public
But
record.
I want it to be clear that the grants would be grants we're applying for, not grants we're giving. And the partnerships could be either with other groups within the township as well as outside the township. There could be, and the benefit, obviously, the Wren grant is a perfect example of what the benefits are.
And speaking of that, I know that they're going to do a rain garden planting at the township building for April 25th? Saturday, April 25th?
Would you want to
Would you
come up
want to
and?
come up?
Hi, I'm Dan Meyer. I'm on the Radnor Environmental Advisory Council, and I'm a civil engineer. Been doing watershed management, stormwater management for 30-some years. This is awesome. I should have been here months ago. You guys are doing great stuff here. Really appreciate it. One of the things I was really interested in, had been thinking about, is this sort of incentive idea. So it's just awesome to hear you guys are already all over that. Anyway, jumping on to the Wren grant. This was the second year we applied. You can get up to $5,000. We got $3,000. We didn't get it the first year. Going to be hopefully building one or two rain gardens out here, right sort of across from the police station, next to where the new parking area is going to be. And we had the workshop this past Saturday. It was great turnout, like 50 or 60 people there. And Right now, we're hoping to have Steve get the rain garden sort of constructed, the dirt part of the rain garden constructed, so that on April 25th, we can have a volunteer outing and plant it. So that's all in the works right now. I got to catch up with Steve about the timing. Maybe it slips a bit. I know the parking lot got delayed a bit.
Parking lot got pushed back because of the wonderful weather we've had the last month, so that's been a little problematic, but I think we can hit the deadline. I do. I think we can make that.
Okay.
Is it still on for April 24th?
5th.
25th.
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 Yeah.
Right. We did something similar 2 years ago in Cowan Park. There's near the restroom building there. There's also a little rain garden that's, in 2 years, has just exploded with almost no maintenance. So it's really neat to see.
It looks fantastic, and we have this gentleman to thank. He did a lot of work there. He maintains it. We just did some of the heavy lifting. And just so the Stormwater Committee knows, when I came on board some 3-odd years ago, I basically offered to any group that wanted to do, if it worked out through Park and Rec and the board and all, that wanted to do a rain garden or a project like that on township property, the Public Works Department was always at their disposal to do the heavy lifting, literally the digging, the placement of the soil, and then that group could obtain plants and plant them. So we did the one at Cowan, we did one at Garrett Hill and Clem McCrone. We're going to do another here, and I hope to continue that as we go through. So they're just little tiny incremental projects that are educational and that help out, and we get free design. The plants are taken care of. We do, we do the excavation and the soil mix. Soil mix is
And, it's a great
relatively
way to show that the township's behind this sort of
Right.
green intervention to get the residents on board. So anyway, happy to offer my expertise to this group anytime. I'm not sure what the avenue is there, but I'll be showing up at these meetings more. It's, as much as I do this 8 hours a day, it's great to hear about you guys talk about it all night.
It's not usually
Thank
this
you.
difficult, I swear.
I was part of getting the trail built. I know all about getting
great.
stuff done in this township.
Could,
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
before Joe gives his language, could I don't know if we need a motion or just say, I want to publicly thank Maya for being on the board for the time that she has, and we just say, just a basic recognition of all the work you did and what you taught me personally. I really appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But since you left, it's not a cistern.
Naming things already.
Okay, Joe.
So this is still rough, but SWIMAC recommends the approval of an Itham watershed engineering assessment at the cost not to exceed $60,000 and to be performed by our new stormwater administrator, CHM. The assessment will culminate with multiple draft RFPs being produced for Radnor that will be prioritized with rough order pricing included. We further recommend that the Board of Commissioners appropriate a minimum of $500,000 for the execution of these prioritized RFPs. It is expected that this remediation efforts will be multi-year and exceed the $500,000 initially allocated. Good, bad?
I like it. I like it. I second it.
Anyone have any discussion on that? It went from 50 to 60?
Yeah.
I like that because the
I
cost
saw-
of the RFPs
Yeah.
is, thank you for.
I saw Dan wince, so I was like,
Yeah,
ah.
I was having a little problem with that number because RFP preparation is a fifth step or additional step, let's put it that way. So thank you for recognizing that.
In fairness, it's not fair to, maybe Steve, you could work with, I think we understand, if we understand the concept, we want to have a fair price to get the right thing done. So we should, if you want to work with Dan to come up with the
I
right
got to
number.
tell you, just as an aside, Dan's original draft proposal was very well done, very detailed. I was very happy to see that. I think you'll be happy with what he provides. If that's the harbinger of work to come, I think you'll be very happy with what he does.
Public comment prior to the vote?
Yes.
I would urge you to table this motion until you have time to fully think through what you're doing. I understand what you consider to be political objectives, I think is rather superficial. The 3 sites you're talking about are all in wards where there's a contested election. Mr. Higgins' pressure is he's in an election. He wants it done now because it's an election year. You're going to lose the trust of the people if you're motivated by these political goals. Let them do what they want to do. I was there when Duncan dug the hole at Branbury Way the first time. He wanted to make it bigger, but he couldn't. He was limited by the capacity of that site. I was at the middle school when they dug that hole, and they never connected it. I was over in at the field by the train tracks in North Wayne twice when that system blown out. I've been involved in this issue for decades, and the commissioners have a horrible, horrible record with stormwater management. If you try to appease them and go their way, it'll be bad for this committee because you'll end up being the fig leaf that they go, well, the committee, they said it was good. We went with them.
I would like to respond and say
Okay.
that when we have been discussing these projects, flood remediation, whatever the term that we decide in this vote, has nothing to do with what ward they were in. We have been talking about this for months in this Ithan watershed, and frankly, for residents who came last week, and to see pictures of those flooding and to not move forward in some direction, this isn't set in stone. This isn't saying that we receive information back from Dan, and maybe it's not the direction we go. Or per his analysis, there might be another direction. We have to start moving forward. This is not a political thing. This is for
It
the
is a
resident.
political thing.
No, it's not. The decision is not political. The decision is to help the poor people in Banbury Way, the firefighters who have to get out in a fire that can't get out because of flooding. This has to do with solving flooding. I don't care who our commissioners are. I don't care what ward they're in. This purely, if you dropped this piece of paper in front of me and said, these are the pictures of flooding, I wouldn't care where they were located. What I would care is how to address it. And we've been sitting here for over a year, and it has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with listening to residents who came here and submitted pictures and videos, and to say to them, we're going to wait for another year to make a decision is really unfair. I'm sorry. And just
Well,
assume
the
that.
projects will fail like the other projects have all failed over the decades because you're not looking at it comprehensively. I know some of you want to.
I think
I'm concerned that
we're
you're not.
having a discussion about something that's really not.
Well, where did the 3 projects come from? Did that come from this?
These are known projects that have been flooding for years with the township.
I think I've labored the point that we
think
do
you
not
have.
have 3 projects.
There are 3
We
remedial
have
sites.
3 known flood sites
3
that
remedial
we
sites.
are looking at remediation designs for. And I am
and
not
it is
politically
politics. I'm
motivated.
sorry, it is straight up
I have
politics.
no reason to change what I've been looking at for the past year. It's been a year that we've been recommending this exact thing. And initially, I wanted to do both Ithan and the North Wayne Creeks at the same time, but I was understood by other members that it would be better a township our size to handle one at a time. I would have done them both simultaneously, but that was a little too ambitious for our budget. So we're looking at one, and then we're looking at the next, and then we're looking at the next. And that's nothing to do with politics.
It's
And I'd
totally
like, wait a minute,
politics.
but I'd like to be, wait a
Unfortunately-
minute, I'd like,
Let us finish. You brought the
you
topic up.
can't
Let
turn around.
someone finish.
I'd like to be very clear about 2 points.
Okay.
In what I talked about and the recommendation and that we just voted on, 3 is not in what I stated. 1,
Did I just not hear the chair say 3 remedial sites?
I just.
We talked
I-
about
I
3
will- I
remedial
will
sites. There are
repeat.
many more sites
I
that.
will repeat. And I apologize because, it'd be better if we had a board, so in deference to you, I said it once, but let me repeat it. This assessment will culminate with multiple draft RFPs that are prioritized based upon stormwater assessment and provide rough order of magnitude pricing. I'm going to repeat that. with multiple RFPs that are prioritized based upon stormwater assessment with rough order of magnitude pricing. I disagree with the number 3. I disagree that we are making a political statement.
Joe, you're the one that introduced the term, think like a politician.
I introduced it for a very important point. We are in a governmental body, I work in a small private business where I can go buy something today. There's a process that's multi-layered and takes a long time, and that's why I put forward the second part of what I proposed so that we can move forward and get approvals to get action. But we are in complete agreement, and wait and vote in a second, that action needs to be taken after careful engineering and assessment has been done. And for you to say that it's in wards is completely out of bounds. I'm from the 5th Ward. We really have no flooding. We didn't look at this, and I hope you took that away. This committee has never, ever looked at things at a ward level, and the only reason I brought it up tonight is the Board of Commissioners, one of the Board of Commissioners asked where the funding was going. So I think it's a fair thing to ask.
Jim
but
made it
our
clear
board,
he
let me
looks at it
finish, please,
politically.
please. Our board, I can honestly say that people's reaction tonight was that in the 1st or the 2nd ward? Well, I only knew because I spent a few minutes this afternoon before coming here to check, just so I could answer the question. But we are looking things from a holistic Radnor viewpoint, just like we were, and the analogy I make is like Radnor High School. My kid doesn't even go there. She and he go to parochial school, but it's an asset that the township uses, just like the stormwater watershed. It shouldn't matter whether it's 1st Ward, 2nd Ward, 6th Ward. It's an asset for the community.
The point I was trying to make at the beginning is the 3 sites you're looking at are 3 sites that have already had a huge amount, millions of dollars of tax dollars put in them to try to remediate the flooding. And it hasn't worked. Systems haven't been connected. There's nothing new in that. It's a contested election in those wards this year. That's why you have your 3 sites. That's what I believe. You say that's not the case. I think it is.
I want to take a vote because I honestly think that the time that we've put in here has not been political. It's been purely for the good of the residents and the township.
I think for our benefit, though, you've given us a repeat on part of the motion. Do you want to repeat the whole thing and just get it on the record? 'Cause
I'd like to hear it one more time.
We've got it typed up partially now. Right? You got it partially?
Yeah, yeah.
Which part are you missing?
I'm missing, let's see.
Because then it's done.
Read it.
In fairness, maybe the best thing to do is for...
Or just bring it over.
Because then it'll be
after
written.
the
I'd
meeting.
rather, if you wouldn't mind, since we've taken all this time, if you wouldn't mind Paul and I just working on...
Perfect. As long as
the
you've got
printed
it
word.
written
And then
down.
Maya, you could come because you were ready to say something, and then I'll pay attention, but then we could get this done simultaneously. How's
But
that?
I think what I have to say might go to whether or not you include a concept, so you can certainly do that.
Okay, well, no, go ahead, and we could even edit on the fly.
Yeah, but
See, if you were on this side, you could be on this side, and we'd edit on the fly.
If you're talking with Paul, you won't hear what I'm saying on the
Yes.
one
I'll
part, so.
Yes,
So I would appreciate that, I would appreciate that. So first off, one of the most important things is I do understand that it can be difficult to accept public comment when you are in disagreement with it, but I think you also have to understand that the public sits out here the whole time for your meeting, having to hear everything you say and disagreeing with it and perhaps even being offended by it. So it's really important when the public comes up to speak. Sometimes you just swallow and suck it up and let them say what they have to say because it's meaningful and it's important and they're communicating something to you, and try to hear what they're communicating. Try not to take offense and get into a back and forth argument. I think that always serves the process better and well when folks can do that. The thing that I heard Steve say, and this is the discussion we've had time and time again, is how about we let the expert come in and make a recommendation and then follow the expert's recommendation? That's what happened tonight. Dan came in, he made the recommendation for a process that included going from modeling down through data collection down to recommending a series of alternatives, including engaging the public appropriately in that alternatives analysis, selecting an alternative, and then proceeding to your RFP project process. And so what I'm confused about is why you would not then be following that good advice and accept the recommendation of the expert. Because what I do hear is there's some acceptance of it, but there is also a veering away from it in this sort of trying to identify specific areas to address immediately. But Dan's process will identify the areas and identify solutions that can be addressed much more speedily than if you sort of have this divergent, disparate process with an analysis going on here and then some sort of differing analyses going on over here.
I think we finally came down.
Take that approach.
Pardon?
Exactly.
I think we finally came down to an agreement on that
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah.
With an addition of dollar figures attached.
Okay. So the language that I've heard so far, I don't hear it that way. So one, it will be good to get that final language. The piece, though, also, so part of the first part, maybe that will be resolved. The piece in your recommendation, I think that's raising huge red flags for me, is that that includes that the analysis is going to result in RFPs that can then be released. But an RFP necessarily means you've sort of settled on a solution, and you are asking for proposals to carry forth a specific recommendation. The thing is, in terms of these stormwater problems, part of the process really should be gathering the data, releasing the data, articulating potential alternatives, then selecting amongst those alternatives, and then you go forth with your RFP once you've analyzed those alternatives and selected one. So that's my concern about the resolution language, is that it sort of results in Dan ending the process with recommending solutions prior to there being the release of the data and the dialogue and the engagement that needs to happen to figure out what's going to go to RFP.
I understand your point, and I agree with you that I was probably confusing. I think Steve said it best in that what we ended up requesting, Dan articulated 4 very good steps, and what Steve said is you've added a 5th step, and he's absolutely right, is that I personally didn't dislike, I thought what he laid out was a very good engineering process. My concern, as I stated, was that I thought that at the end of that process, we'd spend months, while if we add a 5th piece to that process, because he's our stormwater administrator and is on board with us every month, we can be seeing the outputs of steps 1 through 4 along the way. And so the RFPs won't be a surprise to anyone, because along the way, we'll be hearing how the assessment is going and understanding it. It's just that it's one fell swoop instead of then going and saying, okay, now we have this study or this assessment, now let's go on and decide which, so I would look at it as a 5th element of the 4-part.
Yeah. Okay, because
I hear what you're saying exactly, and I was struggling a little bit with the description, but I'm pretty confident that we all know in this room what it is that we're intending. We just have to be careful to make sure that as we pass it forward to the Board of Commissioners, that they understand the intention, and I think our potential consultant already understands it, and it's just exactly what was started out with an addition that the next step would be. And at first I was kind of confused as to where it was going, but I understand perfectly now that it's an attempt to streamline the red tape.
Yeah, the problem is that public participation is a very important part of the red tape, and so
no, we're not cutting that part out of it. That's
ending
embedded.
but ending the process with the RFP doesn't offer that
But we haven't
clarity.
selected what will go into those.
That's part of
Those RFPs
that's part of the problem. The way it was
may
framed,
never get actioned.
The way it was framed, it's coming out of this, and you don't want the public process to come after the RFP, because then it's fighting over what you're recommending. What you want people to do is working collaboratively to come up with the best solution. So you need to find a way to articulate that there's going to be public process considering alternatives based on the science and the data that's secured from your analysis prior to the RFP.
You bring up a good point.
That's-
We'll work the language here, but in the appropriation of the dollars, and it needs to be stated, and maybe it's unstated, we would expect that those draft RFPs would come out of Dan's assessment and would be brought before the board, and we would discuss them in an open forum, and they would actually be published. Well, I don't know. We'd have to get into if you can publish an RFP in its draft form. I don't know how that works from a.
Well,
But we would have certainly dialogue
The intent
on-
of them would be worked out in a public forum.
That's right.
With feedback from residents as well as.
So
the Board
every
of
month,
Commissioners.
I mean, as we go through this 5-step process, there would be I think there would be regular repeated updates from Dan on where he is with things, and then, hey, here's where it's looking, and then these are the items, and then, Jim Smith Farm came out first. It wasn't Francis at all. It turns out Jim Smith has been dumping 5 million gallons of water right above the Wawa, and we just never knew it. So the thing we need to do is turn off his pump. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but like that could be the number one thing that we didn't even know about. But that would be the first RFP that we would then say, hey, you authorized 500K. Here's the first one, and it's this much, but we would move that process along.
I would just encourage you in your resolution to offer really clear analysis that there's going to be discussion. In your resolution to offer, to have a step that there will be public participation in the selection, in the discussion and the selection or the proposal of the solutions prior to the creation of the RFP. That's on, if you don't have that clarity in there, I think there's going to be problems with process for the committee potentially, there's going to be problems for process with the commissioners, and there's going to be problems for the process with the public. And I think that you end up unwittingly derailing any goodwill that you have.
And just to add to that, I think Maya makes a point, and Dan would do this anyway, is that you want choices. So he can put forth his choices, show you 1, 2, and 3, a quick cost benefit. What he recommends may not be what you choose, but that's what he recommends. And that should make sure that you have ability to do some things. But I'm not sure how that all gets worded in this
Can I
proposal.
just add a couple thoughts, just to clarify? I know it's late. So I think the process that I laid out really had 3 key deliverables. The first one is a prioritized list of the flooding problems. The second one is kind of, I think Charles used this term, and I like it, a roadmap. We're essentially creating a very high-level roadmap of the types of solutions we could do, where they might be most appropriate. And then the third is what I was thinking, the 3 concept plans. And Regina, you mentioned, we would be recommending those. And I guess I looked at it as more, we have the prioritized lists. Those aren't projects. We have to look back at our plan, our high-level roadmap, and then determine with you all where it makes the most sense to develop those projects. And so there's definitely different ways to do this. I mentioned before, we looked at, well, what if we try to come up with lots of more specific solutions at specific locations? And again, I think that's a much bigger effort that we don't necessarily need to do. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it does make sense to work back from the prioritized list of problem areas and look at what the actual projects might end up being. And one other point is the RFPs being a deliverable. That's fine. I guess my understanding was the RFP development would come out of SPA, kind of the SPA budget. But if you want us to include that, and we can certainly do that.
I guess I have a question for you, Dan.
Sure.
Up to this point, do you understand what the committee's looking for you in a proposal?
I think I have a pretty good idea of that. Yes.
The RFP, that's a separate cost. So that's really something that once you come up with solutions or a solution or solutions, maybe he lists the cost of that RSP in there, because he might say, whatever, here's one of the solutions I put forth. It shows you the analysis. There's a specific cost for proposals for that solution versus another solution, which may be more simplistic. So since we don't know them, and we see that RFPs do cost money, and it would cost, I would say to leave the cost of that proposal out, because conceivably, this committee could say, CH2M Hill, we request a cost proposal from you to perform the design, the professional design services. So you might not even go to RFP. You might just contract with CH2ML or Gannett or whoever that may be.
The concern there, I understand what you're saying, and the concern on the flip side is that we want to have a commitment in place to move on these recommendations, that they won't just be recommendations that get shelved. And it's tricky because what are you going to write? How are you going to budget for an RFP? The RFP may say, come up with 3 concept plans to remediate this flood site, or the RFP might be, develop this Green Streets design plan, and because that's going to address our flood. So it's going to be very difficult. But is there any way we can put some kind of nugget there so that we can at least initiate something
By rights,
that is going to go forward without having to do the whole loop?
by right, that RFP should be charged to that project, what you're bringing up. So even though we talked about it coming out of this fixed fee, Dan, but that was more of a nebulous number because we didn't know which way the committee was going. But if they're specifically moving towards, and I choose my word, project solution, whatever you want to call it, okay, then that should be charged in our accounting system. That RFP, the cost of that RFP will be charged to project solution X. And
So that's the start of the budget on that
Right.
particular project.
And then-
So is there any way we can get just kind of somehow a commitment that this will not just be a feasibility, that it will actually move forward? How do we do that? Does anyone have a recommendation there?
So we have the board saying to us, do something, so why wouldn't something happen?
I guess it's just the shortcutting that long process of passing things back and forth that we're looking to prevent. So how can we prevent that?
I think we can prevent that by working closely with Dan and seeing, he's going to be at our meetings, and that,
I guess
as
by
we're-
getting our stormwater administrator position in place,
Yeah.
that would
That's
kind of
that's going to be key, because he'll be at our
create the
meetings, and we
avenue
can
by
nag
which
him
we
every
would-
month where,
Does everyone feel like that's the way to go?
yes. Yeah.
Clearly, we need some expertise here.
Just one other comment. So I think the key is projectizing. So it's going from the problems, again, and seeding a list of potential projects. And what we've done for other clients is we create, again, these concept plans, which are, for lack of a better term, they're blobs on a map. This is what an infiltration trench might look like here, or a rain garden might look like here, and this is how much drainage area it would capture. This is the order of magnitude cost. And then that would be the product that could be fed to another consultant in an RFP, design this, and maybe those get packaged together. Maybe there's 5 projects, for consultant X or whatever. So I think
Yeah,
that's
so
the
I think,
missing piece.
Joe, are you okay if we take that RFP portion out of our motion? Because it does give us the flexibility to then just assign a small project to CH2M which it would not if they generate the RFP. They're out of the running.
They can't reply to their own request for proposal.
I'd like to continue to work with them, since I think their understanding of the situation and what our goals are very important.
So they may generate an RFP for some larger project, but they might be able to just go ahead and move forward with a smaller initiative at the end of the process, which we really don't know what the end is going to look like. So,
Well, Regina, the RFP was a deliverable. What would you suggest in place?
well, can we have the option to add that? I mean, how do we make it where it's not part of the budget and it's not necessarily something?
Let me try on something.
How do we fix this?
The wording right now, which we're trying to get to, says multiple RFPs, but it doesn't say that Dan had 6 priorities, or Dan, I shouldn't say, his group came up with 6 priorities, and he said, hey, you know what, Steve? 5 of these I'm going to give you an RFP for, but 1 I don't want to, because we really want to do that work. That would be in his, as a businessman, that would be in his best interest. He could give us 2 and want to bid on 4. You know, I mean, we didn't define that he had to give us an RFP on each of the ones that he prioritized.
That's a good clarification. How do you feel like we should move forward with this, Charles?
My problem is I know what they were trying to get to, and I agreed with the concept. I hear what you're saying about being able to assign lower cost solutions directly to CH2 or to Gannett Fleming or whomever, and that may result in RFPs, but there's got to be some kind of deliverable at the end that ties it all together. And that's really what we're looking for right now. I was hoping you might have an idea.
I would like to see the prioritization with concepts. And the only reason you can prioritize is that you do have a concept and you have a budget and you have you have a feel for whether it's constructible, permittable, do you have the land, is it going to take 10 years, that kind of thing. Once you have that little bit of background, then you can truly prioritize things that can happen.
Well, that could be your deliverables.
So it's really the
Prioritization with concepts.
prioritization with concepts and the necessary constraints addressed.
I feel strongly that, I'm sorry, I feel strongly that we need to keep the word RFP in there, because while I understand Dan is a businessman, you know, one of our 4 tasks specifically calls out the development of RFPs for Steve. So if they want to decide not to do it, then, which I don't think so, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but if they decide not to do it, then we need to go to somebody else to get the RFP done, you know, so.
I guess I'm under the assumption that we're getting that through our stormwater advisor, but if we're not, you're right, we're in a pickle.
Right, so I think we have to write the RFP, because if we use any other language, I think RFP is I use the word deliberately because it's a very actionable thing that leads to action. And concept could lead to inaction. So
But
I think
the RFP budget is not something that we can, it needs approval.
Well, I think it's an implementation detail that we can handle when it gets to that.
Can we leave that
time.
out of the cost portion of this at this time?
I think
I don't know how we can put a price on RFPs for things that we don't know exist.
Could I make a recommendation and just a thought? And I know Mr. Shan wants to get this on Monday's meeting, but with all that Daniel Weibel has heard, my suggestion is let him put together a draft proposal for your review, because I think there's so many questions, a lot of verbiage, a lot of concern, and if he could get that proposal to this committee 2 weeks before when's the next meeting? April 13th? So if he could get the proposal to the committee by April 1, you have it to peruse, study, and then everybody can, on April 13th, come up with exactly what they wanted to say, give clear and concise direction, and then from that point we move forward. I know that means we missed the 23rd meeting, but I just see that the commission is struggling with some pretty big issues here, you know, at the end that are part of this. And maybe if you have, it's always easier to edit than create. So if Dan creates and you folks can look at it and track changes, but then when you come here at the next meeting, everybody is fully immersed, fully prepared, has read it, and can provide their solutions. And then you come out of here with a proposal from Dan, or what will be a final proposal that then goes to the board. Just a thought.
I'd respectfully disagree. I'm sick of waiting. I mean, I don't disagree at all with everything you said, other than let's wait and do something after Monday, because everything else you said we can do after Monday with the board's approval, because unless I'm missing the process, because all we're asking them is to allocate the spending of $60,000, and I think that the RFP part is important because it shows our intent. How we end up funding it, if Dan comes in and says, you know what, that's a big RFP, well, we have another RFP line item in our administrator budget anyway to pay for it. So I think we can work those implementation details without difficulty. But I hate to wait a month, which then now we're into May. By the time we get on the commissioners, we need to move. We need to move forward. And I don't mean to move forward expeditiously in a dumb way. I mean, like, he's ready to go, we're ready to go. We're ready to get the stormwater administrator rolling. Like, let's work the proposal. I definitely want to see another proposal from him personally, and we can work that, but we can work that in parallel with having approval so that he can go start working it 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, because we're hoping that they get signed up Monday night, and we can get him working on this as soon as he starts this. This would be the first thing that he works on other than just the normal stormwater administrator stuff.
So I guess we're only asking for draft RFPs, and that's really doesn't have to be a fleshed out full-on RFP, and then it would then be kicked to the stormwater administrator as an RFP assignment.
Which is Maya's point anyways, which is right, is that we want a draft RFP from them that then we can talk about in public at the board. We can go,
So it's not something that can be put out on the street. It's just it's just the ideas.
My envisioning is that we would see it and we'd say, hey, Dan, all right, change this, and maybe we would all vote on it, and that night we'd be good and the RFP would be ready to go, and he would just work the details with Steve. We would get public comment. You know what I mean?
I'm just trying to think. We have a mechanism through the stormwater administrator to put out RFPs. So I guess that's where the sticking point is right now as far as how we move this forward. So I feel comfortable that we don't need to have that pinned down so much because we can always kick it through there. So basically, we're looking at what was presented initially with the addition of, I don't know was concept part of that? Do you want to, I don't know if you were really getting as far as concept.
I was going to say
You were looking at potential ideas for solutions, but I don't know that you were quantifying that in that.
I was just going to add that I'm comfortable if you want to go to the board with price, and we can negotiate in the interim what that scope ends up looking like after tonight's discussion, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you have enough information from us. You're pretty much the only thing we're going that RFP step, but as well as maybe pushing those a little towards a little more of a concept plan than you were initially seeing. Am I kind of right there?
I think so.
Okay.
I think
All right. So we can make the recommendation that you add those elements to what you were initially assuming we were looking for, because we're working it out.
It's adding, it's revisiting some of the assumptions that were in the scope. So I think.
But we're not putting ourselves in a position where we can't succeed, are we?
No, I don't think so.
You have enough information and we can work forward. If so, say.
We were in that ballpark without the RFPs. I think we can take a harder look at some of the
figure out a way to
some of
make
the
this
scope.
all work.
Again, I think this was very helpful hearing the different perspectives tonight.
Okay.
And I definitely appreciate, the inclination toward action. I think that's
Okay.
great. I want to see
Good.
action.
Good. We're not scaring you.
No.
Can I read what we have at this point? I'll read
Yes.
slowly. So SWIMAC recommends approval of an Ithan watershed engineering assessment at a cost not to exceed $60,000. This assessment will culminate with multiple draft RFPs that are prioritized based upon stormwater impact to remediate problem flood areas. A rough order of magnitude pricing would be included. The stormwater administrator will report at monthly stormwater meetings on progress. We further recommend a minimum of $500K be appropriated for execution of these Ithan Creek stormwater remediation efforts, and all draft RFPs will be discussed at monthly stormwater meetings. It is expected that these cumulative efforts will be multi-year and far in excess of $500K in total cost. The Board of Commissioners will be regularly informed on progress with updated costs as the engineering assessment proceeds. That is really long.
I'm not in favor of the far exceed bit.
All right, exceed.
What was it? What is it exactly, that language, that little?
And far in excess.
Yeah,
of
far in
500.
excess.
Okay, so what do you want to say? Just in excess? All right.
If that passes, Mr. Bergmeyer, could I ask you to email me that?
I'm going to, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything anyone needs to add or change at this point? Is everybody good?
I just wanted to ask Maya if that, your public comment part, if that.
There was one little bit that I was.
There's stuff, I appreciate
differently. But I hear you.
Yeah, I was looking a little bit more for the public involvement element there. Reporting at our meetings isn't the same as having maybe a information session that's open to the public, maybe a workshop or something like that, where, right. But I don't want to, I want to make sure that it incorporates feedback from the public.
Well, if we state that here publicly, is that?
Can you?
I think by definition.
As long as everyone's clear on that, I just want to make sure that that's known. It's part of that. There will be opportunity for
We can
public
reflect that in the
interaction.
minutes.
Right, and
So
whether
that's
it's-
noted
okay.
in the minutes.
Then I'm good.
And whether it's this project or any project, I
that's
mean, I
really
think
why-
that's,
and that's
public
why-
involvement is absolute.
And that's why
Well,
we,
it's not always been the case in this township. That's why I want to make a clear point that it has to be.
and it's a good point, and that's why I added the sentence about Dan providing us monthly updates at each, because that's obviously in public, and we can say, hey, where are we going? We have task 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Well, task 1's done, and we would actually ask him to present task 1 here. And you know what I mean? Then task 2.
Yeah, and we have to use our website and things to get that word out there. We have to be very conscious of that. Yes. Okay, thank you. Did anyone second? You
I
seconded.
second. Oh, you second? I'm sorry if I'd missed that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, 10:04:09.
It's less than an hour and 45 minutes, well, an hour and 56 minutes to the year of my people, or the day of my people. We need to end soon.
I just wanted one quick question. Is there,
Talking about Lafayette all the way.
are we, to jump back real quick for the incentive, residential incentive, for what we discussed earlier tonight, are we going to, I guess, put anything forth from, a summary of what we discussed and what we agreed upon? Because I know we talked about language earlier and what we agreed to. So we voted on it.
Yeah.
So.
That
and you
content
were
is gonna
do
be
a
moving
memo. I just
forward.
wanted to make sure that you were
Right.
going to do the memo and.
Yes.
and
Yeah,
bring it
because the
next month.
content that we voted on
Okay.
is really the
Is
essence of
is the
it.
action.
Yes.
Okay, so next month, put that, or sooner, so submit it to the
Yeah,
board.
I think it's ready to go to the board. It's just a matter of how soon it can get on.
Okay.
So if,
If
and
it's
I
not
don't-
this meeting, then
And
it
I
would
don't
be
know
the
whether,
following.
did you want to do a presentation at the board?
Well, what I'd like to do is just a short, PowerPoint, just to say, hey, these are the things that,
I think a handout would suffice, and then you could just talk. I don't.
Yeah, it's up to you.
I will have something prepared.
Okay.
Just to go over what we've done in the past year.
Yeah, I think just a list.
Right,
It's
'cause I
going to
think
be
they might-
long,
they
because there's
might
a
be
lot that happened.
Jumpy to talk about certain things and
And
might
then
not be focused on the
I would
PowerPoint.
have that to them, in their packet, so they have it in advance.
And what I could do too, I'll work on it this week and submit it, and if you guys want to add your
Yeah, that'd be
thoughts or
good.
comments, let me know.
That'd be good.
What's the deadline to get it in their packet?
I always thought it was like a week and a half before. It was at least a week
Is
and
it
a half.
Wednesday?
The meeting is this Monday.
Yes.
So not last
So we
Friday,
can't
but the
even-
Friday before that was
So
when
we can't even submit anything at this point?
No, I just want to have something prepared.
Okay, so it's a handout at the meeting.
It'll be a handout at this point. Okay. All right, and our next meeting is April 13th, which will be Monday. I appreciate the hard work the subcommittee's done, and staying late tonight. Thank you very much. No, there was just a conflict for this month and for April, and after that, I was assured there is no more conflicts, and that we will be here on Thursdays. There was just something that they had booked, I guess, a year ago, and when we moved from the roll call room to here. Thank you.